Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, and welcome to the International Conference, AI and Global Power, Regulation or Reliance. The conference is taking place in this nice place here and the historic Palace of Grand Dukes of Lithuania. Today, we gather to explore the transformative power of artificial intelligence and its implications for global governance, competitiveness, and strategic balance. To officially start the event, I would like to ask our Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Julius Pranevičius, it's a great honor to ask Julius to come to the stage for the opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues. On behalf of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kęstutis Budrys, I have a great pleasure to welcome you all to Vilnius, to this international conference, AI and Global Power, Regulation or Reliance. As you are aware, this event is held alongside the 2025 Annual Ambassadors Convention, a tradition that brings together all Lithuania's diplomatic community to the capital to reflect on global challenges and opportunities. Unsurprisingly, the focus of this conference is one of the most transformative forces of our times, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is no longer just a technological tool. It is a strategic asset shaping global power dynamics. From economic competitiveness to military capabilities and diplomacy, AI is transforming the way states interact and compete. The race for AI dominance is intensifying. This competition is not only technological, it is geopolitical. It's about who sets the standards, who controls the infrastructure, and who defines the rules. United States and China are investing heavily in AI as a pillar of national power. Aware of this dependence on US big technological companies, and in opposition to China's authoritarianism, the EU is taking initiatives to strengthen technological sovereignty, security, and democracy. In this context, Lithuania must be smart, agile, and principled. We may not have the scale of global giants, but we have a vibrant AI startup ecosystem and values worth defending. We are well placed to contribute to global AI governance with our top digital priorities, security, and competitiveness. To make this contribution coherent and efficient, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is preparing digital diplomacy guidelines aiming to define priorities for Lithuania's diplomatic service in fields of artificial intelligence and emerging digital technologies, cybersecurity, and e-governance. Our goal is to strengthen Lithuania's contribution to global AI governance to ensure that democratic values are embedded in the digital future, and to strengthen our partnerships with like-minded nations. We are also working to internationalize Lithuanian science and innovation by promoting cross-border research collaboration, attracting global talents, and supporting our universities and research institutions in becoming active players in the global AI ecosystem. While supporting competitiveness and promoting innovation, Lithuania believes that technological progress must not come at the expense of fundamental rights. That is why we support global efforts on AI governance aiming to establish shared, values-driven standards. In the context of multiple international frameworks for AI governance, Lithuania calls for stronger alignment across the EU, OECD, UNESCO, Global Partnership on AI, and UN Digital Compact. We also promote the Vilnius Convention, the Council of Europe's Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, which was signed in Vilnius on September 5, 2024. Vilnius Convention is the world's first legally binding international treaty that establishes minimum standards for protecting human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in relation to AI. However, we recognize that achieving global consensus is challenging. This is why regionally we welcome EU AI Act as a pioneering effort to regulate AI in a way that is both innovation-friendly and human-centric. Lithuania is committed to implementing it in a way that supports trust, competitiveness, and responsible innovation. In the military domain, Lithuania is committed to the responsible use of AI in full compliance with international law, including international humanitarian law. Lithuania supports implementing the political declaration on the responsible military use of AI and autonomy, and actively participates in high-level meetings on responsible AI in the military domain and relevant NATO formats. Before I conclude, I would like to sincerely thank all of today's speakers and panelists from Lithuania, other European countries, the United States, and India for sharing your insights and expertise. Your contributions are essential to building a shared understanding of the opportunities and responsibilities that come with AI. The choice we make today will shape tomorrow's world. Let us use this moment to build bridges between innovation and responsibility, between nations and values, between power and principle. Thank you, and I wish you a productive and inspiring conference.
Thank you, Vice Minister, for a very warm welcome and for explaining the role of artificial intelligence in the Lithuanian foreign policy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Lukas Savickas, Minister of Economy and Innovation of the Republic of Lithuania, for the opening speech.
All right. Well, Your Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, it is an absolutely a big pleasure for me to speak today at this event, which is dedicated to artificial intelligence. And perhaps it is the defining topic of our time. Over the past few months, I had many pleasures, and AI has been the most frequent theme so far at the conferences I had to attend. And all the meetings I lead, the policy tables I sit at, all of those are very similar. AI topic is found at all of the meetings. And I think it cannot be otherwise. We are living at a very clear turning point, and the one where our economies are reshaping themselves, but not around territory, not around our trade routes, but around data, algorithm, and ability to make sense of a complexity at a machine speed. And this, of course, is not a trend. It is a very clear structural shift in our global economy. And Lithuania is not watching from the sidelines. Let me share with you how we are turning this ambition into action. A week ago, Lithuania has submitted an application to the European Commission for the construction of a national AI factory. And it is more than a €100 million project to be built. And this, of course, is more than just about infrastructure. It is, of course, a commitment to become a regional hub for applied artificial intelligence. It is an opportunity to combine and compute power to real-time data and talent under one roof. And we expect hundreds of high-skilled jobs and applications from public services to private industry. But our ambitions don't stop at the national level. We have joined forces with Poland, Estonia, and Latvia to propose a Baltic AI Gigafactory, a €3 billion regional initiative. which is aimed at building a European-scale supercomputing and generative AI platform. And together with our neighboring countries, we seek to create a regional language models, train sovereign AI European systems, and provide computing capacity for researchers, innovators across different sectors. And this initiative is already under active review by European Commission and is one of the most ambitious AI cooperation proposals in the region. I'm very glad to say that Lithuania is one of the drivers of this initiative. And this is, in my opinion, how small countries can have and become smart powers. AI is not just a technology. It is a multiplier of our productivity, of our resilience, of our decision-making. It is in cybersecurity, in defense, in precision manufacturing, in public administration. It is already rewriting the rules of all of those and many more. For Lithuania, investing into AI is investing into our competitiveness, into our security, and of course, our sovereignty. And for me, as a Minister of Economy and Innovation, I am not asking whether we should be leading in AI. It is really a question of how fast we have to get there. And it is something which I want to address a part of our audience today, and it is our dear ambassadors. You are our most powerful connectors to the world, and I think in the next coming months, we will need you more than ever to promote our AI factories and the Baltic AI Gigafactory in your host countries, to build coalitions with our universities, investors, and innovators, and to position Lithuania not just as a place to visit, but as a partner to build the future together. So let's not be passive storytellers. Let's be strategic messengers, opening doors and planting partnerships where they matter the most. And for all of us, dear ladies and gentlemen, I think Lithuania has shown to the world that we can turn our crisis into a launch pad. We did with our energy independence, with financial crisis, with COVID pandemic. We took those challenges and we grew those into strategic opportunities. From fintech success to biotech and life sciences industries, which grew immediately as our reaction to those crises. So let's seize this moment. Let us share Lithuania is not just prepared for the future, but let's ensure that we shape it together. So this conference is exactly the place where everybody can meet, discuss, and move to the action points which are desperately needed. Thank you so much, and all the best in our upcoming discussions.
Thank you, Minister, very much indeed for outlining the Lithuania's ambition in developing the AI capabilities and also for inspiring words for this conference. So we now move to the heart of today's program, 6 keynote presentations that will guide us through the latest breakthroughs, challenges, and regulatory perspectives of AI. Each speaker will have 15 minutes for presentation, and we must be strict about the time limits to allow for discussion after the presentation. So our first speaker will explore the latest breakthroughs in AI. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jens Redmer, Principal on New Products at Google.
Thank you very much. It was very inspiring to see the energy that we heard already in the room this morning. Let me switch to my presentation. Can you switch to the slides, please? So I've been with Google for 20 years now, which makes me, as they say in Google, a classic member. I have an inventory number stitched onto into my suit. So I've seen a lot of things come and go. When I joined the company, we were a search engine, nothing more than that. There was no YouTube, there was no Google Maps, there was no Google News, no Google Mail, none of these products that many of you may have used this week or even today. So we saw a lot of innovation come. There was a couple of products that failed, which is part of our DNA. And I'd like to give you a quick overview of what's cooking in the AI kitchen. 2 weeks ago, I woke up at the hotel somewhere in Europe, and I went to the breakfast room, and the muesli box that I opened had a sticker on it, and the sticker said the recipe was optimized by AI. This is when you notice that you are in a hype scale. So Gartner said this year, from September 2024, that generative AI is already going down. It's already surpassed the peak of inflated expectations. But make no doubt, it does have its potential, and I will dive into some of this. It's important to understand where AI is positioned. AI is a lot more than chatbots. AI is a subcategory of computer science, a big and important subcategory, but it's a subcategory. Within AI, you have machine learning. Within machine learning, you have deep learning. Within deep learning, you have generative AI. And within generative AI, you have chatbots. The problem is that everybody today only talks about the green dot, forgetting sometimes the impact of AI, of technology, and of computer science to the wider industries, to companies, to public institutions, to individuals of all sizes in every single country. So until like 2 years ago, when OpenAI opened ChatGPT and made the so-called Kitty Hawk moment, made it visible to the wider public, a lot of the innovation in AI went under the hood. So AI is used for email spam filtering, for providing better browsers, more secure systems, for better recommendations, for photo systems, for online translations, and many more services. And it does have a tremendous economic potential. 1.2 trillion in gross domestic product can be added to European countries if AI is used correctly and effectively. In Lithuania alone, that has an equivalent of 3 billion euros in gross domestic product, 5% of the GDP. So there's a lot of potential for companies of any size. And Google are doing a lot of things with partners globally, with Mercedes-Benz. I'm from Germany, so I give you a couple of German examples where AI is now being used to bring AI into completely new experience within your car. Lufthansa Airlines is also using this to operate more efficiently, more effectively. And speaking of the airline industry, this is one of the toughest challenges. That it's widely misunderstood that emissions in aviation can be controlled in an effective way. So a lot of the emissions that you can avoid are from so-called contrails, and contrails are oops, hold on. That's interesting because it's a security. Interesting. Google tells me from now to then that I need to re-enter my password, which I now did. All right. Security at its best. All right, so let's continue. So contrails are the stripes that you sometimes see behind after, and they are responsible for some 30% of the warming effects. So if you create systems operated by AI that tell the airline captains to fly a little higher or a little lower, you can avoid a lot of the contrails because they only form at certain altitudes under certain aeronautical conditions. So you can use AI to significantly reduce the heating effect from these contrails. In my hometown and many others, we have added so-called Project Greenlight, which is an AI-optimized service to optimize the switching of traffic signals. And we adopted using public data from the local communities and combined that with Google Maps data, and thereby optimized emissions by 10% in one city alone. So just by adding a few tools. Very current, we have optimized flood forecasting using Google Earth's geospatial models, particularly for third world countries where some of the reporting mechanisms are not readily available. A Nobel Prize just last year was given to one of the most innovative AI breakthroughs in chemistry and biology. And generative AI is probably what people think when they hear the term AI. I'd like to demonstrate to you a couple of things how generative AI can be used to increase productivity. And our chatbot, our ChatGPT at Google is called Gemini. It combines multimodal so-called methodologies, so you can input text, videos, audio, whatever format you can use, and it can also output in these different formats. So one example that you could think of is to perform a sophisticated, up-to-the-minute cross-check between the official 2025 strategy plans of the Ministry of Economy in Lithuania and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So how do these people can combine? I'm sure you talk to each other, but how do you identify synergies and how do you propose concrete collaborative actions? Let me switch to the live version here. So I uploaded the two documents publicly available, two PDFs, uploaded that to this document and to Gemini, and then I gave this exact prompt that I just read, analyze it. So it gives you, here's an analysis of the strategic plans of Lithuania's Ministry of Economic Affairs. What are the shared interests? So high-tech sector promotion, attracting this diaspora talent for the innovation economy. I hope this resonates with some of you. Digital and green innovation, and I'm not creating any diplomatic challenges here. What are the talking points for the Minister of Economy and Innovation? So he should address the Minister of Foreign Affairs with the following initiatives: tech-forward economic diplomacy, global talent for a high-tech future program, and so forth. So you can detail and elaborate that. So you can even say, I'd like to continue, I'd like to dive deeper. I meet a member of the press in 15 minutes. What are the 3 areas of collaboration that I'd like to highlight between the two ministries? You can obviously also look, how do I challenge my colleagues? How do I challenge my own plan? How would a journalist challenge my plans? So really insightful, very quick things. Another more personal example is from my wife. My wife has been outside the workforce for 15 years, taking care of our kids who now have left school. And she now wants to rejoin the workforce. She saw an advert for the WWF NGO and she wanted to apply for the job. So she said, can you help? And I said, I can. So let's ask Gemini to create a very deep research plan. It's a new feature of Gemini to create research for you. Not only ask a question on the fly, but perform a research, just like an agent, like an agency or a consultant would do for you. So you give a very detailed prompt. I will be interviewing for a job with the German subsidiary of WWF, and I need the following research. What are their current projects? What are the news? What are the priorities of WWF? How does the work of WWF in Germany differ from the international branches? The second block, how can I be successful at this type of company? It's a different company than a corporation or an industry corporation. So how would they measure my success? I can upload my CV. I uploaded the CV of my wife. So she's returning for the first job. How can she make her absence from the job market a strength? And what are the arguments that she can live? What are the possible questions that she would expect? And what are critical questions that would be asked? And how would this work? So the research now starts, and it does take a while. It could take half an hour. It could take half a day, because this agent will now scan the entire internet based on your research input and do the work for you. It will come back with a 30-page document that is listed here. We can't go through all of this, but you can take this document and either read it and print it, or you can also input it into a new tool that's called Notebook. Notebook is a very cool tool that can be used to so-called ground the information that an AI chatbot can understand. So you can tell the chatbot, here's the information that I want to give you. It could be a company report, it could be a set of documents in all kinds of media, and that's all the AI chatbot knows. So the risk of hallucinations, wrong information, wrong numbers is literally zero, because that's the information that you ground, that you limit the AI chatbot to. Now you can ask questions. So in this example, I input the document, the 30-page research document, into this tool. You can still read it, you can get a summary, but you can also create mind maps. You can understand, how does Gemini think about WWF, your need for the application, and how does this, how do I define success? How success is probably measured at WWF. So a different way of addressing a very long form content. If this is still too difficult, you can do what's called an audio overview. So Gemini can create a radio show-like podcast out of a long-form document and can talk to you. So what she did, she took this document and created a podcast and listened to it on the radio. This is how it sounds.
Today we're doing something really quite focused.
That's right.
This entire exploration is really crafted for you, especially if you're someone considering re-entering the professional world after, well, dedicating nearly 2 decades to raising a family.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal today is to thoroughly examine WWF Deutschland.
This is automatically generated. Maybe you can turn up the volume just a tiny bit. I'm not sure if you heard that. So this sounds like a radio show, and the real value came when she was driving in the car, and you can now join an interactive mode. This is similar to you call into the radio show, and you get accepted, and you can talk to the 2 moderators. So let's see how
their
this works.
core mission, how they actually operate day to day. Oh, hey, welcome. What's up?
Hey, can you ask me 2 really tough questions, and how would I answer them?
Oh, we love that. That's a fantastic idea.
Absolutely. It really puts you in the hot seat, which is where you want to be.
And it connects perfectly to what we're talking about later.
Exactly. We'll be diving into interview strategy.
So they typically answer in a very generic way, but you can also challenge them and say, hey guys, I don't need that generic stuff. I need real hardcore figures. Please give me some examples, perhaps even some concrete key facts that I can address in my key questions. So this is now your interactive AI coach on your specific subject. And again, the subject was chosen by her, and the good news is, and I will close with this, she got the job. We will, at Google, we will continue. This is obviously, and we already have heard this, obviously an area that needs a lot of responsibility, a lot of opportunity, a lot of fascinating use cases, from climate change measures to economic impact. There's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of questions on disinformation, on misusing these tools, on cybersecurity questions, on sovereignty questions, and the likes. So we are a very big player in this game. This is why some 10 years ago already we have applied some AI principles, and we probably will talk about this in the discussion in a while. One thing that I would like to end with is Project Astra, which is now launched in a tool called Gemini Live on your mobile phone, which you can use to point your camera at things and understand the world and make an interactive live demo. Let me see. Let's see how that looks like.
Tell me when you see something that makes sound.
I see a speaker, which makes sound.
What is that part of the speaker called?
That is the tweeter. It produces high-frequency sounds.
Give me a creative alliteration about these.
Creative crayons color cheerfully. They certainly craft colorful creations.
What does that part of the code do?
This code defines encryption and decryption functions. It seems to use AES-CBC encryption to encode and decode data based on a key and an initialization vector, IV.
That's right. What neighborhood do you think I'm in?
This appears to be the King's Cross area of London. It is known for its railway station and transportation connections.
Do you remember where you saw my glasses?
Yes, I do. Your glasses were on the desk near a red apple.
Okay, that's the killer use case, finding my glasses. Thank you very much. I look forward to a fantastic panel discussion and open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens, very much indeed for this fascinating presentation and also for this practical, show how Gemini and Astra works. Indeed inspiring. Now I would like to turn to a local success story, and I would like to invite Mr. Vytautas Sabalys, investment manager at Tesonet and head of legal Nexus AI, who will share an exemplary story from Lithuania, where it all started and how it led to deployment AI responsibly, with a focus on security.
Thanks a lot. Hello, everyone, dear ministers, dear vice ministers, ambassadors, distinguished guests. Yeah, so they asked me to do a presentation on Lithuanian business success story, and we Lithuanians are humble people. So I kind of changed the name to. But I think what we created here, I mean, as Lithuania and as our company's group is actually a bit successful, at least. I'm going to tell you the story about how two people started the company back in 90s, maybe in 2000, in the beginning of 2000s, started the company in the flat in the apartment in Vilnius area of Fabijoniškės. And that company's group now increased to such heights as owning one official unicorn, and I think at least a few of unofficial unicorns. So I'm Vytautas Sabalys. I'm an investment manager at Tesonet, as I was presented. I also took the position, secondary position as a head of legal in one of our newest additions to the team, Nexus AI. It's an AI orchestration company that I will also tell you later on. So Tesonet, by raise of hands, who of you have heard of the name Tesonet? Oh, that's a lot. I'm happy about that. How many of you before the event heard about Nexus AI? That's more than I expected, actually. Yeah, that's very nice. So where it all started? It actually started in 1990 when Tomas Okmanas and Eimantas Sabaliauskas, the founders of Tesonet, met on Mirk. Also, who of you have tried Mirk back then? Yeah, also, I think the same people that know Nexus right now. So. Yeah, it was a kind of chat, Slack-like chat, but way simpler and not business related. But as the PR said, it helped to create the business. So they met on Mirk, and they decided, Thomas was more like IT geek kind of person. Eimantas, and still is, but Eimantas was also IT geek, but more on marketing side. He was also working in a marketing agency and creating some kind of products there. But they decided they have to do something together. And they started, a few projects, from small scale projects, and try to do something bigger. They met once in a while in Tomas' apartment in Fabijoniškės. I think once every Monday, every week, they started. Two of them started in Tomas' apartment, thinking about what new products they can build, and they built quite a number of them. And they built 34 projects that right now we can call them as probably failed projects, or at least not all of them were successful projects. And 35 projects, so 34 fails, and 35th project was a project that we now know as NordVPN. NordVPN is, probably most of you know NordVPN more than Tesonet or Nexus. Is the biggest brand in the VPN, or one of the biggest brands in cybersecurity worldwide. It's a B2C product. It also has some B2B layers on top of it as well. Back then, they created NordVPN just basically for themselves. They had a marketing startup, like ad startup about ads, something like Google ads or something like that, just maybe smaller scale. And they needed to check how these ads work when looking from another geographic location. So they created a small VPN for themselves just to check how does it look from Brazil or from Vietnam. But they also launched that for the other clients, and a month after launch, they checked their after one night they checked their bank account, and they saw that there's like $1,000+ in the account overnight. What happened? How did it pick up? Suddenly, some kind of blogger mentioned their VPN in his blog, and the users just picked that up, and the journey started. So they ditched all the other projects. They worked fully on NordVPN, and then all the other projects piled up on that. We Lithuanians, and all of we Lithuanians, being a small market, even the Baltics market is rather small. We can't create the product thinking about global reach, create a product for the Lithuania first. We have to create, and I think that's a good thing about us. I mean, if you're in Germany, for instance, and that's just my take, but if you're in Germany, you probably can create. You have the luxury to create projects just for the German market, because the German market is way bigger. In Lithuania, we have, we don't have that luxury, but I think that's even bigger luxury because we must think about global reach from day one. So that's what Thomas and Eimantas did from day one. They even among those 34 first projects that they created and that they failed, they created, for instance, some games, like game developers, and they sold one of the games to electronic arts. It was not an easy sale. They emailed many game developers worldwide, global companies. But when they started creating the game, they knew that this is not the game that they will, pursue their whole life. They created that to sell to some global developer. So we in Lithuania have to be ambitious and think about global market. And I think that's our pro. Where is testnet now? We have invested or kickstarted or founded more than 40 products. We employ almost 4,000 employees, I would say, but let's keep to the official 3,500 employees. And I'm happy to say that, at least 80–90% are Lithuanians. Most of them are working from, Cyber City that we have here, HQ in Lithuania. So, probably 90-something% of the people working in Cyber Cities and Cyber City employees, can hold, I think, up to 3,000 people. So 90-something% are Lithuanians. All the management of NordVPN, of testnet, are fully Lithuanian people. So we're proud of that. We need diverse positions. We do have a lot of foreigners as well working in the company in different positions, but we're still very proud that we can keep the core of the company Lithuanian. And well, we internally kind of joke, maybe it's not that kind of joke anymore, but that there are not that many companies in the world that do B2C, B2B, and B2G, at the same level, let's say. Well, probably Microsoft is one of them. I guess Google could be one of them as well. But these are just few giants. And I think we're also a bit proud of ourselves that in our companies group we have all these know-how more or less at the same level. We have B2C, for instance, NordVPN is a B2C company, pretty well known, right? B2B, we have Oxylabs, which is a proxy and scraping services provider and infrastructure for that part provider. They're working with Fortune 500 companies. And we have B2G, for instance, Norstellar is also a product to manage threats online and to scan if your data was leaked or not. So governments are using that as well. This is our portfolio, just to understand better the brands and the numbers. So we have kind of 3 buckets here. The first one is the founded companies. So Nord Security and Surfshark is one common unicorn. They reached unicorn status in 2021. Oxylabs, as I mentioned, is a B2B company. Nexus AI is the newest addition to our team. It's an AI orchestration tool that I will soon tell you about. MediaTek is our media company, and CyberCare is an IT customer support company, also employing a lot of Lithuanians and not only. And then we also have investments part. So not all these we don't own all of these brands, right? We have a non-majority part in most of them. So, for instance, Hostinger is a GoDaddy-like company. Žalgiris, probably most of you know Žalgiris is a EuroLeague basketball club. So also we proudly own part of it. We recently acquired London Lions. Cyber City. London Lions, is a top British basketball league club. Cyber City is a real estate project here in Vilnius, and we're also building a similar project in Kaunas. We recently invested in 15 Min Group, also a media company here in Lithuania, and all the other investments. And also we invest into funds, venture capital funds, private equity funds, just to boost the economy, give something back to the economy, so that the other startups could become unicorns here as well. And yeah, let's go forward to Nexus AI. So where it all started. Basically started by this whiteboard. Back in October last year, it's just a few months back, like 8-9 months back, Thomas Akmanas came to our room in Cyber City and said, guys, I think I have an idea. I have an idea. What should we do with AI? I mean, all our companies, all our products were doing something with AI already. I mean, and they're still doing. Each company has its own. Sometimes it's just efficiency. Sometimes it's a new product in one of the brands. But he said we should build something that we actually need ourselves. And this is AI orchestration company. Very shortly, the idea of Thomas was that there are many large language models, and we both, mostly talking about that smaller part that Jens mentioned, not the whole AI, right? We're not Google yet, but there are many large language models, and the feel is that at most part they're becoming similar to each other. One does one better, another does another thing better, but they're kind of becoming a utility, kind of a commodity, right? And when the business has to choose, for instance, they're creating the customer support chat, should they integrate to OpenAI or should they integrate to Gemini? The integration with one tool takes time, it takes some kind of cost, and they kind of locked in on that integration. Maybe they should try another one. Maybe that one is the cheaper, but that also you need a separate integration, kind of starting anew. So we said, look, maybe the customer doesn't have to choose. Maybe we can be that one layer that customer integrates, and then we can provide the customer any LLM they want for any use case they want. And that was the idea. The fun thing, that we said, okay, maybe we're not the smartest guys in the room as it concerns AI. So Thomas went through many tech founders in the market, not just Baltic market, but also global market that he knows, and said, guys, tell us why we shouldn't do this. Why is this a bad idea? Most of them couldn't tell him why this is such a bad idea. Most of them wanted to invest in the product. So, fast forward a couple months, not even a couple, I think 1 month, we signed a term sheet with Index Ventures, which is, probably among top 3 biggest venture capital funds, most well-known venture capital funds in the world. They were very eager, and I mean, not to boast here, but the investors were actually showing a lot of attention from different countries, different regions. That just showed us that we probably found at least something. Another fun factor, all the fun facts here, but we didn't have any product at that point. We signed a term sheet under big valuation. At that point, we didn't have a product, but what the investors believe is the idea of the product that we have and the team that can actually do it. So so we landed Index Ventures, landed Crandom, that's also investors in such products as Spotify, for instance. Dig Ventures, and also a lot of angel investors with kind of good names, founders or CEOs of such products as Wix, Klarna, Revolut, Datadog, Supercell, Vault, Vinted, and the others. So I don't have much time anymore left, but quickly about what does Nexus AI do, right? So how does the world look without Nexus AI? Over 55% use in the companies, like in enterprises, majority of enterprises use 4 or more different AI tools. Over 70% are running 10 or plus separate AI projects. So for the IT administrator of the company, it's AI chaos, it's hard to manage, it's impossible to see which and how AI is used, and it's expensive to maintain. It's hard to control the budget even, right? How do we help here? You have one interface for all your AI. Right, we have a gateway for instance, for AI-driven companies. So let's say not AI revolution companies, but for not AI revolution we have Workspace. For AI revolution companies we have gateway. So meaning that if you're doing something AI-driven, we give you API to our product and you use it. For the legacy companies, I don't know, we can take banks, post office, or something else. We have the Workspace. So basically, think of it as ChatGPT, but with all LLMs, and you can choose which LLM you want to talk with. What guardrails do you set up? What happens if you send the personal information to the LLM? You can kind of limit that. What happens if you wanna if you can't choose the model, you can try all models at the same time. So number of important features. So it saves times, simplifies integrations. It's cost efficient. It lets you adopt AI fast, and I think that's the most important thing. What we wanted, what we decided that what that leads to is bigger, faster, AI adoption, not only in Lithuania, in the Baltics, but also probably globally. Some success stories, but probably I can tell you about that later on. We have 40 people here in Lithuania, full-time employees. We have some people in Poland as well, as we see that there's a bit of a it's hard to find required talent here in Lithuania sometimes at this point, but we trust that with the help of the AI factory, the ministers and so on, we'll work on that. And how we help, how we want to help build the ecosystem powered by people, software, and real-world innovations. We decided to do this project called Generation AI. So starting from September, we're giving all our AI products, basically Nexus and Hostinger Horizon products, to Lithuanian schools for classes from 9 to 12 grades to try free of charge. They can build, we can build websites. They can chat with ChatGPT and or Google Gemini or whichever model they want, and learn for themselves. And probably, hopefully, will have more unicorns in the future. Thanks a lot.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you. My name is PJ Makish. I'm the Vice President of Strategy from an organization called the Special Competitive Studies Project. It is funded by the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, to use the private sector for national purposes and tech strategy in the United States. I'm proud to say that I am a Lithuanian American, and so I want to say thank you, first of all, to the Lithuanian ambassador to the United States, Audra, wherever you may be in the room. I'm sure you're here, and Jurate, who are responsible for me being connected to this conference here. I want to also thank Lina and Rokas, who are organized this conference, and I will keep us on track and end at 3. So the purpose of this is to inject a little bit of state power considerations to such an audience. First of all, I want to offer 5 propositions about how AI will affect state power, talk a little bit about the China-Russia situation, and then end with why both the Vice Minister and the Economic Minister are correct that you cannot move fast enough into Lithuanian power regarding AI. So first of all, 5 propositions regarding AI. When we were on a national commission in the United States to think about this, from 2019 to 21, we thought the best way to explain this to our citizens is that AI is a general purpose technology, which means it is generally useful to most functions of society, like electricity, like the machine age. And so what you see here is just a basic march of the history of general purpose technologies that subtend most of civilization today. Number 1, the machine age. We often think about this as the creation of the steam engine, 1780, and the perfection of that engine, and how that created machines. And as you can see, machines are still with us today. So that history never goes away. When a technology is generally useful, it never leaves the earth, which is going to touch on my second proposition. Number 2 was electricity. And so when Nikola Tesla was heads down on his lab bench, just trying to get electricity into an alternating current on a battery, I think it was very difficult for him to see the Earth electrified at night. Over 100 years later, if you see it from space, the whole Earth is electrified because he was able to create AC current. And so generally useful that it's very unlikely that electricity will ever leave civilization. So I'll end there. The next sort of general purpose technologies, automation is its own world. It has nothing to do with AI. They're only intersecting now. Automation begins usually in auto factories approximately in the 1970s and have continued to be perfected into the age of robotics today. And then, of course, digitization. Number 4, this is a domain of human experience that was completely inaccessible to all of you until it was technologically enabled. There was no cyber domain. There was no website until 1991. So that is a general purpose technology, and it's very unlikely that the digital world will ever leave now. There are trillions of dollars exchanged globally on just the digital economy alone. I have yet to be able to get deep research to even be able to bound an accurate number of dollars exchanged digitally in the world every day. So it's unlikely to leave. And the next 2 we suggest are AI and biotechnology. So proposition number 2, if you look at this chart, the nature of general purpose technologies is that they never leave. They stick and they stack. Stick meaning, as you see in the machine age, I don't know if anybody's been in a Tesla or any other EV that just drives itself. It's a robot on 4 wheels. You take your hands off the wheel. It's quite exhilarating. We now have taxis like this, starting in the US. So my point is that the machine age, I'm good. The machine age has continued to this day. So machines are unlikely to leave the world. So same with electricity. When the machine age and electricity combined to create the Industrial Revolution, obviously, as you see the room today and my gear, which I'm trying to get organized here, electrical gear has never left the earth. So the purpose is, second proposition, we are talking today about a general purpose technology. It is a general purpose technology that is in essence the beginning of forever. That's what I want to try to prove to you. When you're talking about a GPT, it does not leave the earth. It tends to stick, and it tends to combine with the other general purpose technologies to change civilization. So proposition number 3. I want you to think about a stronger form of artificial general intelligence coming within your presidency now. We're at approximately what's called level 2 AGI now, with the release of an OpenAI model called O1. It is possible that we're starting to see level 3 now. Level 5 is artificial superintelligence. So we are the world, if you look deeply into the intellectual property, you might think of this as the business intelligence of the best AI labs in the world. What they are seeing now is not what you are seeing now. And so I want to persuade you that a very stronger form of AI is about to come, so you cannot think about this fast enough, and you cannot move to this fast enough in terms of developing national power in this space. Number 4, I'm going to show you at the end of this presentation that there are offsets because of AI all across society, meaning beneficial productivity and efficiencies that will come to most forms of your society, to include education. So these offsets are all over the place, and companies like yours are racing into those offsets. It's almost so exciting you can't even think about what could be achieved. So there's offsets everywhere. And then finally, I want to suggest to you that proposition number 5 is that AI is being fueled by the 2 largest economies in the world. They're not the only ones that matter by far, as we just saw. It was such a wonderful presentation about the ecosystem here. But the fact is, $28 trillion and $32 trillion economies are combining $60 trillion economies to move into this fast enough, which is why in the United States, we developed a national commission to think about the future of AI. I served on that commission. We set it up in 2019 to 2021 because we realized that China was out organizing the United States. Xi Jinping saw a DeepMind effort called AlphaGo. If you've not seen the AlphaGo documentary, you should. I make all my undergrads watch it. I still watch it myself. I still enjoy it. It never gets old. But it's so 2016. It happened a long time ago in AI speak. But Xi Jinping watched that. In 2017, AlphaGo came to China mainland and dismantled the best Go player in China. In fact, Xi Jinping terminated the TV broadcast at game 2 of 5 because it was destroying their player. So he saw that and moved out in 2017, created a national plan. The United States didn't have a plan. So what I'm suggesting to you is proposition number 5 is this technology we're talking about is being fueled by the 2 largest economies in the world, so you can't move fast enough to find your own position in it. Now, moving to this, you can see that the United States felt it was not organized. So now what I want to move to is the fact that not only is AI being fueled by 2 largest economies, I suggest to you that all of the other technologies, because if you believe me that it's general purpose, can be touched by AI. What you see here is our own gaps analysis of positional advantages between the United States and China in different technologies. This is called our gaps report. We've done 2 of them. In the gaps report, what we were really trying to show is that China has dominant macroeconomic positions in batteries. Obviously, Lithuania learned personally about the Huawei 5G experience. Commercial drones like DJI, they dominate the US market. So there's positional advantages, and it was time for us to wake up and realize that an authoritarian, largely regime inspired by communist philosophy was developing these very important technological positions in the world, and we needed to sort of do that comparison. My point here is that there's no subject on this map that's not going to be touched by artificial general intelligence. So I don't want you to think of these technologies separately. You know, as a nation, you need to think of them as combined, because they will combine. So now, what I want to suggest is that one of my undergraduates and I, Naya Stewart, worked on this concept of, for all the diplomats in the room, spheres of influence. We tried to create something called technology spheres of influence, which is how will technology influence the decision-making of other nations? And we simply binned it in 7 categories that you're all probably very familiar with. But starting at 0-1, there is a big game in the world going on for rare earths and critical minerals and elements that create the fundamentals, like the 3 nanometer microelectronic in my iPhone over there. There's substance and materials that are required to create those things, and there's a game for power over those types of things. You can go all the way around the dial to strategic global infrastructure, and of course, China has done something really brilliant in that space in terms of trying to define the future of the internet with exportable forms of 5G, which the United States does not have, but Europe does, in terms of Huawei 5G. That game's still playing out. So this is just an idea that we place to say, if you're dealing with an international competition, and if technologies can influence the decision-making of other nations, then you should diplomatically kind of think about tech spheres of influence. And all of your activities should be thinking about acquiring the best leverage for your own nation in that regard. Now, with the time I have left, what I want to do is I've given you 5 propositions about the future of AI. I've kind of tried to inject about where this is in the competition. Where's Lithuania? Besides the innovation ecosystem, this great piece was written, it's called From a China Strategy to No Strategy at All. And before I ask this, I'm just curious how many people in the room were present for the celebration of the Baltic Way, in 2019, right here in Cathedral Square. Could you just put your hands up, because I see a few people who were physically there when that happened. That's cool. Okay, about 10% of you were there. If you were not there, what you didn't see was the Chinese MFA organized a protest to clash with the Lithuanian protesters right here in the most sacred place in Vilnius. And from that time forward, of course, Lithuania went on a journey to say what really matters in our interactions with China. You are still sorting that out to this day. But when this was done, on the sense of high political relevance and high economic relevance, Lithuania was one of the most competitive nations all by itself, and I took note as a Lithuanian American. It didn't seem to me that Lithuania consulted anyone. The principle was so important, and the offense was so great, that Lithuania just went on a path of competition to stand on principle that I still admire. But it shows that you're situated in the EU project, and thus every nation's views on China are greatly different, and I think this is a challenge for Lithuania. Okay, I conclude by saying, just as the power and principle that the Vice Minister brought up in his speech, if you're balancing power and principle, what I want to suggest to you is you cannot acquire power fast enough. You will always be able to march with principle, but if you focus too much on principle and not enough on power, you'll be left behind. So what I want to suggest very briefly here is, what I've listed is specific applications that are changing whole functions in society. So very briefly, in education, we have the combination of AI and a free and open university for students called Khan Academy in the United States. And that AI is creating a tutor that tailors the education to a student of any age. So if you want to elevate the entire tide of education in your nation, particularly in the homeschool universe, now you have Khanmigo to do that. So outcomes in education should increase with AI. Number 2, diplomacy. Diplo AI, I think, is here. I think they're here today, but they are trying to create a perception layer to do fusion for diplomatic purposes. I think it's amazing. We have similar companies in the US. OpenAI released a model called O1. It's so 2024. But that outperformed humans in multiple sciences by 10%. The story of how that model was created in US national labs is not told yet. Hopefully someday there will be a good book about it. Intelligence, Rhombus, is a company that is creating intelligence fusions for statecraft. They're operating in the United States, but they also have contracts around the world. Rhombus is showing how AI can be used to sense-make in the world at a very high level. Finally, there are drugs that are being created by AI. Halocin is an antibiotic that was so 2020, created 5 years ago, by a machine learning algorithm that figured out how to denature the electrochemical membrane of a virus. So in essence, it starves a virus. And it was a completely new mechanism. So that was done by AI. We are working on something called MedShield, because we believe that nations are developing bioweapons as offset to nuclear weapons, and there's no strategic defense for that. Each one of those technical areas is AI-enabled. In disinformation, look no further than the Ukraine company Live Universal Awareness Map that has created a gauntlet of AI proofs of whether something's true or false before it shows it to you as news. So when Ukrainians were trying to survive Russian disinformation, AI came to the rescue in the form of the CEO that created LiveMap. And finally, in terms of governments, I think someday you should think about AI being used to generate a game instrumentalized with real-world data that helps you govern. You might think of it as alpha strategy. So my purpose here to end is to say, these are forms of power and leverage that are good for society. They are good for civilization. And you cannot move fast enough into these positional advantages. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, PJ, indeed, for such an inspiring presentation and for the powerful insights into the geopolitical landscape. Now I would like to turn to the global regulatory landscape and to invite our guest from India, Mr. Amlan Mohanty, who will speak on different approaches to AI regulations globally and also provide some recipes, perhaps, for a win-win AI regulation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Firstly, I just wanted to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Lithuania. Thank you, Rokas, for inviting me to be here, and especially Ambassador Diana, Ambassador Lina, for the warm hospitality that I've received in my first visit here to Lithuania. Hopefully, I'd like to repay that in India sometime. So I was asked to talk about global AI regulation, and there are many ways and approaches that I could try and answer that question. But I really wanted to start with what I think is the theme for this conference, a very timely, provocative question, right? Regulation or reliance? So I'm going to take up on this difficult task of trying to answer that question. And I'll actually just start with, right up front, the 3 points that I want to leave you with, right, over the course of my presentation. The first is that when we think about AI regulation, we can't think about this in isolation, right? It actually requires a very holistic understanding of, political ideology, sovereign strategic objectives, as we just heard, what the market dynamics, the innovation ecosystem looks like, what the socio-cultural norms are, and I'll try and present to you how, obviously, different countries around the world are thinking about AI regulation, but the fact is it needs to be rooted in, a deeper understanding of the economic, political, socio-cultural context in which we're operating. 2 is, going to be really blunt to try and answer that question. I don't think that we need to pick between regulation or innovation or regulation and open markets. We need both, right? And we really need to both support innovation and be prepared to manage the risks. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a society to decide where on that spectrum, right? And I do think regulation falls on a spectrum, where on that spectrum we want the hammer to fall, so to speak. And the final point I want to make is that, it's very easy to say, we need to balance innovation and regulation. When I speak to policymakers around the world, that's the first thing they say. But I really want to offer some concrete solutions, right? And I know it's an ambassadors meeting as you go out and speak to governments around the world, really to be able to provide some tangible solutions to how we can help find that common minimum ground around balancing innovation and regulation. So first, a little bit about why I'm here. I've been interested in technology and policy for all of my my life, but over the last 2 years in particular, with especially the launch of ChatGPT, I've been deeply researching AI and regulation. So I've been writing and publishing widely, both from an Indian context, but also a global context. I've been traveling different parts of the world. Over the last month, I've been in the US, Korea, Geneva, now here. And in India, of course, trying to understand and educate and advise policymakers on how they can approach this very complicated issue of AI regulation. So I want to maybe share kind of what my observations and learnings are from some of these conversations that I've had over the years. The first, and I think for me at least personally, is I am now convinced that AI is something that we really need to regulate, right? Or at least be prepared to regulate. And you might wonder, why have I reached this conclusion? Is because when I speak to governments, especially in some parts of the world, I think it's the question I first get is, what's unique about AI? Every time we have a new technology, do we introduce a new law? Do we have a new law for digital printers or for the blockchain? The answer is no. But over the course of my research, I found that what's particularly unique about AI is perhaps why we need to think about regulation and regulation very differently, right? The fact that these are not rules-based systems anymore. In many ways, we don't, and the people who build these systems don't understand it. It's inexplicable to the human mind, right? So that's particularly unique or novel about AI. The fact that we're now being able to create outputs, multimodal outputs, in ways that are indistinguishable from humans. The fact that these are highly autonomous systems that are operating autonomously, not just in the virtual domain, the digital domain, but increasingly in the physical domain, right? Making transactions, operating heavy machinery, and so on and so forth, what we're calling agentic AI. The fact that they're adaptive, right? They're improving, recursive self-improvement in ways that we hadn't seen before. And the fact, as we've heard from some of the previous presentations, when AI is combined with other general purpose technologies like biotechnology or quantum computing, we actually don't know where this is going to lead, but it's going to fundamentally transform society. So That's what I think is so fundamentally unique about AI, which is why we need to have a very different lens to regulation. And through all of my research, I've actually identified 6 specific risks that are either novel or uniquely tied to AI, or increase the risks of existing technologies when they are combined with AI, right? And there are examples of each of these, the fact that you can create deepfakes that impersonate humans in a lifelike way, national security concerns relating to cybersecurity attacks on critical information infrastructure that are AI-powered. Obviously, the fact that several AI models are biased in that they are not trained on culturally representative data, the privacy and security issues where models are trained without the consent or informed consent of individuals, the fact that a lot of the AI resources are concentrated in specific countries or companies, and more broadly, systemic risks relating to concentration. So for these reasons, I'm convinced that we really need to be thinking about the regulation of AI. So I speak to policymakers around the world, especially in subpatch, where they say, we don't need to regulate AI, and I point them to this slide. That brings me to the second piece, which is that around the world, we have vastly different approaches to AI regulation, right? And I mentioned earlier, I do think about regulation as falling on a spectrum. And you can see, there are approaches that are very light touch, voluntary, kind of principle-based, and not legally enforceable, to what we have in the EU as the best example of, binding enforceable regulation. And again, as I said, it's for us as a society, and this might be informed again by political, socio-cultural norms, where we want to lie on that spectrum. What I am observing, though, is increasingly there seems to be some consensus around foreign governments that we want to be closer to the middle, right? We don't want to have very strict regulation that are binding but perhaps going to stifle innovation, but also not something that's extremely light touch. So I am definitely noticing the trend towards having something that's a little bit more voluntary and principle-based, but the fact is that there are different approaches to AI regulation all around the world. The one point I think I really want to leave you all with is that I see this very interesting kind of difference in how the global south, which is a developing world where India, for example, is a leading proponent of, is skeptical of AI regulation. And increasingly, I think this is a spirit or intent that I think they're communicating with other parts of the global south. And I wanted to just capture the current sentiment or approach that India has towards AI regulation in 4 points, right? Which is that, one, India is very intent on maximizing the AI potential, like every other government, but I think it's been very clearly articulated by the Prime Minister to say, I want to use AI for development, right? And anything that gets in the way of that is something that I want to avoid. And if regulation is going to get in the way of AI for development, that's something that I want to be very cautious about. And so, it's encapsulated in India's kind of approach to AI regulation. Two, the idea that while AI might require regulation, it does not require a separate AI law in the way that EU and Japan more recently has enacted. India obviously has a very complex set of laws and regulation, the constitution, statutory laws, executive actions, and the general view in the government is that this is sufficient to regulate most of the risks of AI. If there are specific issues that need specific attention, you can have targeted rules and amendments, but you don't need a separate kind of AI law. And fourth, and most importantly, I think this is increasingly becoming something that governments around the world are taking note, is we need to promote self-regulation. We need to encourage industry actors to adopt responsible AI practices to address some of these risks that I outlined earlier. The final point I wanted to make in terms of kind of my recent observation is that I think there is a need, obviously, for global agreement. And I'm actually very impressed with what you've achieved here with the Vilnius Convention, representing many separate global powers, advanced economies, and AI superpowers. But I'm actually, at this point, less optimistic that we're going to make that progress. In an increasingly fragmented world, with different strategic sovereign objectives for different governments around AI, I actually don't see that path forward to a global consensus anytime soon. And I've identified kind of 3 big issues, quickly to run over them. On substance, right? It's not clear, for example, whether we want specific issues like access to advanced GPUs to be part of a global treaty, right? Should trade barriers and questions of access to AI be part of the larger conventions that we're discussing on AI? Definitions, right? We don't have a clear, comprehensive global definition of AI. How should we define AGI, artificial general intelligence? It's actually all of the companies that are, defining these terms rather than governments and policymakers. Similarly, on process, right? It's not clear what the forum is which is most appropriate for specific types of global AI governance discussions. Do we need a different forum to discuss AI in the military context versus AI in the civilian context? What's the right forum that will give us the level of flexibility that we need, right? What are the trade-offs involved in that? What's the right forum that will give us the precision on legal terms that we might need for specific types of issues? What are the types of issues that are better negotiated at a bilateral level, right? And India, for example, has very strategic technology partnerships with the EU, with the US, and perhaps that's the forum where some of these issues should be discussed. And finally, the question of capacity. Do the international organizations, policymakers around the world, actually understand both the capabilities and risks of AI? And from at least my recent meetings in Geneva, I was left with the impression that that's actually not the case. There needs to be a lot more engagement and interaction between policymakers and industry to be able to achieve this global consensus we're looking for. So back to the original question, right? Regulation, innovation, what's the right balance? Can we find a common minimum ground for the world to engage on this issue? I'll start with point number one. I think we need to really think about self-regulation and voluntary commitments as a way to find some baseline common norms. And I've done some deep research on this. Hopefully, we can get into the details of this in the panel. But there are 5 specific recommendations I make in this regard. One is to start with risk classification frameworks. I know the EU's AI Act has one, but the fact is that we need to think about this in a local context. The objective of a clear risk classification framework is to understand, hey, these are the types of use cases or systems for which we're OK with having voluntary self-regulatory frameworks. And these are the types of risks for which we need binding, legally enforceable rules. And I think it's really important to ensure that this development of risk classification frameworks is informed by tangible evidence of harm in the local context. So the example I often give is, while the EU's AI Act has a very comprehensive risk classification framework, 3-tiered system, it's not something you can simply transpose to the Indian context or to the Chinese context. And so every government around the world needs to think about risk classification, and for them to decide these are the types of risks for which we're OK having voluntary self-regulatory measures, and for this, we want to have prescriptive regulation. 2 is you really need to incentivize the ecosystem. I see this in India all the time, which is the industry wants to adopt responsible AI guardrails, but they want some incentives to be able to ensure that they are recognized, right? And you can think about subsidies or grants that are linked to these commitments. You can think about making regulatory sandboxes contingent on adopting specific ethical AI guidelines. You can, and the GDPR does this really well, is have certification marks on your website to say I've adopted these voluntarily and so on. But we need to have a system of carrots essentially to be able to ensure that this works at an ecosystem level. 3, and this was, I think, for me, a very surprising and unique insight, which is that even in the context of voluntary industry-led efforts for responsible AI, they want the government to be involved at every stage of that process. So they want the government to initiate that process, to help in resolving conflicts between different types of industry entities, and eventually to be able to endorse that framework and say, this is actually has the support of the government, right? And I think these are the types of efforts where the government needs to be a little bit more proactive to ensure that the regulatory objectives are met. And finally, because these are not legally enforceable mechanisms, industry-led voluntary measures, we need to think about alternate accountability measures so that industries and companies that are actually adopting these voluntary measures are held accountable. And we can do that through transparency reporting, through parliamentary kind of committee hearings, but we need to have an alternate system of accountability. And finally, I think to make all of this work, we need to have strong institutions. And that can involve safety institutes or technical organizations or industry bodies that are self-regulated that can provide the government with the necessary kind of reporting and monitoring functions. But I think we need a strong institutional framework to make self-regulation work. The second, and this is a point I made earlier, which is I'm personally of the view that voluntary mechanisms are not sufficient in themselves. They are necessary but insufficient. We also need hard binding rules, right? But we need to narrow down the scope of what those rules are to make them useful and effective. I think the biggest, area in that respect is transparency, right? To ensure that, companies are more transparent and legally obligated to be transparent about, what kind of data they are training their models on, whether that's copyright protected data, whether, it's been subject to licensing fees, whether they're used in, other contexts in which for which consent has not been obtained. So, many ways in which I think transparency obligations can be improved. 2 is, as an individual, as a citizen, as a consumer, I'm particularly interested in what the rights-based framework will be for future AI. I can't even contemplate what rights they might be, right? You might want to, opt out of AI systems altogether. You might demand that actually for a certain kind of recruitment issue, I want a human to actually review it. You want, a right to an explanation, a right to understanding. So, the rights framework, I think, really needs to be embedded in the law. The third, I think, important issue is around liability. And I know the EU is discussing this currently. You need to have that very clearly set in the law. On the question of deepfakes, right? Who's liable? Is it OpenAI, that's generating that content, the social media company that's helping, virally distribute that content, or that user that's, creating that with malicious intent? You need to be very clear about what the obligations and liability is for each level of that value chain. And finally, to ensure that you have strong enforcement mechanisms to make it work. The last piece I think I just want to mention, which is, what we really need is, flexible, agile, creative solutions. And I wanted to point to something that India has kind of been talking about at the global stage, which is, let's not think about, regulation simply in the sense of legislative legal frameworks. It's an innovative and a different approach. And what we're calling, and the Prime Minister Modi's been talking about this at the Global Forum, is what they call a techno-legal approach. Can we embed some of these principles, whether it's fairness, whether it's non-discrimination, whether it's transparency or consent, into the technology itself, right? And some people have famously said, code is law. So if you have those regulatory principles embedded into the code itself, perhaps you can achieve those objectives without having to have a heavy-handed kind of legislation. So this is just an example of how India has done this. India adopted a data protection law last year, but for several years before that, they actually ensured data minimization, purpose limitation, consent fairness through what they call the DIPA framework for consent management. So just another way in which we can adopt creative solutions to achieve those objectives. So I just want to end with this slide, which is back to that question, is it possible to kind of balance regulation and reliance on AI? I think the answer is yes. And this is the vision I have, right? With the right, smart kind of principle-based approach, it's a win-win for everyone, right? Governments are assured that they are going to be able to maximize the potential of AI for the benefit of their citizens, but are equipped with laws to intervene to manage risks when required. Industry are comfortable knowing that they are on the path of innovation and they can continue to innovate, but with clear kind of guidelines for how they can, for how regulation will apply to them. And finally, for consumers like all of us in this room, to know that we will have access to cutting-edge innovative tools, but if there is a potential risk to my rights or freedoms, I will have access to grievance redressal mechanisms. Thank you, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Amlan, very much indeed for very insightful analysis of regulation principles at a global level. Well, now I would like to invite our next speaker who will address the probably tensions between regulation and competitiveness in Europe, or will provide us some next steps or some practical advices how to avoid that and how to move forward with competitiveness and responsible regulations. Mrs. Doris Polt, Vice President of Digital Europe. Please welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm actually very thankful for the previous speaker. He already opened the topic very well and everything about the regulation part. So my task is now to think more about where the competitiveness lies here, or is it a booster or a burden for the company side? And maybe firstly, why I'm speaking in the name of industry is that Digital Europe is gathering the digitally transforming industries all over the Europe. We're doing it through the national trade associations, as Infopalt is in Lithuania, or as my organization in Estonia, and then also the corporate members. Altogether, 45,000 companies are the ones who we're representing, whose knowledge we are relying when we speak about different regulations, technologies, everything what starts to affect us. It means the business sector and our competitiveness, and we want to speak along how to make the Europe to be this kind of digital powerhouse for the future. And that's the main idea. And firstly, I think we should speak a little bit, think that how Europe is doing right now. That what is the situation right now there. And when we speak about that, then of course, the one fact which is spoken quite much right now is that we're lacking behind. When we speak about digital technologies, then we're lacking behind in our competitiveness. 8 critical technologies. Out of 7 of them, we are lacking behind. Only connectivity is the ones where we are advancing. But in order to be resilient, in order to be competitive, we need also to be advanced in AI, in semiconductors, and so on, so on. So that's the situation. And why it is in this way, then I have to say that I think that the main barrier isn't the talents or the size of market, because we have the market here. It's like 440 million customers in Europe, 23 million companies in Europe. So the market is here. What we're lacking is single market. We're lacking harmonization. There are different rules in every country, and that's what makes the companies this kind of hard to scale faster. And there were our this kind of what holds us back. We need to think more about how to do those things together, how to build up those norms together. For me, this kind of hardcore fact was that during past 5 years in Europe, there was 13,000 different regulations done. What do you think, what is the same number in the US with the same amount of time? 3,300. So quite big mismatch, I would say, in those numbers. And this kind of a harmonization is something which is holding us back, I think. And this is the situation what we have right now. And of course, we need to think how now to jump faster. Going to the AI situation, then what is the uptake of AI in EU right now? The latest data says that right now the adoption of EU in European companies is average is 13.5%. And yeah, Lithuania right now a little bit lower. This is the last year numbers. But the important fact is there, the target what EU has, that we have a target that for 2030, 75% of the EU companies are using AI. We have 5 years to go there, and today the average is 13.5. Quite a big leap needed to be done. And that's the challenge there, what we're having, that are we doing enough, or is the environment inspirational enough to do the things? And these kind of things, what's starting to think us that what should be the next steps, and what's holding us back then. And when you look at this kind of AI regulatory ecosystem, then I very much liked what previous speaker said, that AI doesn't happen in the vacuum. Everything's concerned with the AI regulation, it doesn't happen in the vacuum. It's the part of the bigger ecosystem. And we have to understand that firstly, in this kind of foundational level, the root level, there are this kind of ethics and all these parts, what we have. And code of ethics and what we have to consider. Then we have horizontal legislation like Cyber Resilience Act, like GDPR, like this Product Liability Directive. And then comes the AI. And AI Act, I dare to say that it's, let's say, globally the most complex regulatory effort what we have seen. And with I think it's agreeable that the aim is good there. What we want to achieve with the AI Act, the overall aim is good. That to ensure that AI systems in the Europe are done in the trusted, in the safe, transparent way. The overall aim is very good. And then the next level comes this kind of sectorial legislation. That what happens in the different sector. When you think, for instance, the medicine sector, then already in the medical device regulations, there are inside the medical scanners and the rules what applies to the scanners, and there are already that how you use the people data and everything concerned with that. So there are inside those regulations already the things which also amended to the AI. And what makes then the things different or complex for us is that there are coming these duplications, AI Act, and then the sectorial acts, and how we as companies have to navigate there. Which kind of rules we have to look in order to be sure that we're doing things in the trusted way. And of course, more interesting things goes even when we start to speak country by country in Europe. Because yes, we can have one AI Act, but every country will deploy it in a little bit different way, having slightly some changes there. Or little bit like thinking in these different sectors, thinking differently. And now when you're, I don't know, Lithuania, an AI company having solution for the health sector, how easy it to go to Germany and start there your business? Different standards, different rules. Again, comes the challenge that we're lacking the harmonization. And that holds us back, why we haven't like grown fast enough in order to achieve the target that 75% of the EU companies should use AI. I think this is right now this kind of like a set what holds us. And then what are these kind of real impacts for the business sector? There are firstly this kind of positive side, reputational impact, I would say, that if company meets to this kind of AI Act rules, then it as a trust label. It can be used as a trust label for the before the competitors. That you applying to those rules, it means that your AI product is safe, it's transferable, and so on. So this can be this kind of reputational good impact what's coming out from that. So the other part is this kind of organizational impact, that what are these kind of costs in order to be compliant for the AI Act for the company? What happens if European companies have to start to hire more lawyers than programmers, than engineers? Will it boost our competitiveness really? Or will it hold us back? I think that's the thing there, that how high is the compliance cost for the company, that for the smaller companies to ensure your conformity for the AI Act, it can cost up to 300,000. Is it normal? And this is something which will hold us back, or will make, let's say that will make things slower. And the other part, of course, is all this regulatory burden, the high compliance cost, and that's the discussion what have started, I think, now also in Europe, that maybe we should hold back with the implementation of the AI Act. As right now everybody's speaking about simplification, there are concrete proposals, what to simplify, what to do, how to avoid the duplication and so on. Maybe we should do firstly this simplification exercise, at least the business sector thinks in this way, and then go into implementation with the AI Act. But this is, yeah, very new topic yet. But yeah, looking from the positive side, what the businesses sees, what need to be done in order to unbox the AI growth, let's say, that how the different sectors can support it. Firstly, I would say that I think we are having too much discussions in Europe about the risks, that how risky it is. But we don't think about in this that what good can happen. We think more that what if something goes bad? And we should rechange this thinking part and then start to innovate more and more into the new technologies, implementation of the new technology. For example, every country should boost their sandboxing, that in the real life environment, companies can sandbox their AI solutions. And as an outcome of that should be that if needed, then the rules will be changed, not the product so much, but the rules. Of course, in the cases also the product can be, but I think we don't want to change the rules in some cases fast enough, but we don't think in this way that many of those regulations, what we have, are done in the years when we didn't speak even about the digitalization. Maybe they are a little outdated. Maybe it's okay to change also the rules and regulations. To think in this way in order to boost the innovation. Of course, the other big part is how to bring the R&D innovation into the companies. How to bring it more to the market, that to commercialize everything good what is done in an R&D field. How to boost that far? It's always the collaboration between the companies and between the universities and boosting that part. And skills, of course. We can't emphasize enough the skills part, because with the we having totally new technologies, and it means we need reskilling, we need upskilling for the people who are today in the workforce. But in the same time, we need to change the ways how we're teaching today's youngsters, or what kind of curriculums we have in the universities. That's why I think it's actually great to hear that the companies in Lithuania are giving freely to the schools their AI tools, or that we in Estonia having this kind of AI Leap program for the schools. Because it's totally different thing how they using the AI today already, or who is the new workforce who's coming to the market during the next years. And all these reskilling programs, upskilling programs, new technologies, I think it's very much needed. So concluding from the private sector side, I would say that yes, let's think more about the positive sides, not so much, not only about the risk. Then maybe some stop would be needed in the implementation of the AI Act. I dare to challenge that part. And maybe we should exclude already existing AI tools from the regulation, because otherwise this will stop the market. And in many cases, I think it's already thought in this way. And wherever possible, please harmonize. I think because that's the thing, that companies, when they want to be international, then common rules is something which is helping them to grow faster. So thank you.
Thank you, Doris, very much indeed for your very positive presentation and for your invitation to look at regulation from the very positive side and from with a mindset how to foster innovation in the EU. Thank you very much. And also, you have already somehow made a good presentation for the next presentation about the EU regulation, for which I would like to invite Mr. Marius Vaščega, the head of the European Commission representation in Lithuania. Please, Marius. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, colleagues. You know, I was listening and I was thinking that on one hand, to find myself in front of this formidable audience, I was told that probably there are around 70 ambassadors in total, 60 Lithuanian ambassadors to various countries, but also some ambassadors from other countries residing in Lithuania. So this is a position of very great power. But on the other hand, I was thinking that as a speaker number 6, I'm also a little bit in a position of risk, because the minds can start wondering. I'll speak not in terms of technical slides. I will not have legal deep dives. I'm not an AI expert, but I'm an expert on something which is just as complex, and that is the EU policy making. And I've spent 20 years working across various different fields, and I can tell you that one thing, that the EU's approach to the AI is not just about algorithms. It's about values, it's about governance, and it's about trust. So I'll try to offer a friendly guide to this very ambitious idea, making AI safe, fair, European, and also competitive, to come back to the last speaker. And perhaps I will give you a few good reasons to feel proud of what we have built in Europe by making this AI Act and what it stands for. So let me begin with the basics. The AI Act, which entered into force last year, is Europe's way of saying, yes, we love innovation, but let's not burn down democracy and human rights while we train the chatbot. So it's about creating a single market for trustworthy AI. And I underline here the word single market, because when you said that 13,000 regulations in the EU, it's actually majority of them are national regulations. So once we have something which is for the single market, then we already replaced 27 regulations with one. So I think this would boost the uptake while we would ensure that people are safe, rights are respected, and no one builds a tool that acts decisively but answers to no one. That is not something that we want to achieve. So, yes, adopting the AI Act has been hard, and implementing it will probably be also quite hard because of, as you were saying, different ways of harmonization and different depths of harmonization in the EU. But this is where the work only began. You know, I think what I should say is that the the EU AI Act doesn't regulate everything. It regulates just the risky stuff. So we've ranked, and this was already mentioned, we've ranked the AI systems into 4 categories. First is the unacceptable risk. Think emotion detection at the job interviews. Think of real-time facial recognition in public, except for some exemptions there. Think of social scoring. Think of manipulative AI toys. These are banned unless you're writing a dystopian novel. Then the second category is the high risk. AI in border control, healthcare, education, or judicial systems. These must follow some rules. Transparency, safety, accuracy, and yes, with that comes some paperwork as well. Then the third category is the transparent AI, transparency requirements. And these are the systems that need to tell you they are AI, like chatbots or deepfakes. In essence, if it quacks like a bot, it should say it's a bot. And then there is a low or no risk, which is recommending, I don't know, Netflix shows, translating menus in the restaurants in Vilnius or something like that. And there is no regulation in this place. And in case you were wondering, no, the AI Act does not apply to military systems. It does not apply to scientific research or anything that is being developed in purely personal, non-professional capacity. So we've made some calculations. And according to our calculations, 85% of all the AI applications would not fall into the AI Act regulation. And for the remaining 15%, we want to achieve maximum simplicity. You might wonder which category the general purpose AI would be. Since the rollout of ChatGPT in 2022, the public has become more aware of both benefits and risks of AI. In fact, the general purpose AI, the chatbots, which we know, they are like Swiss Army knives of AI. They are very useful, but of course, there can be certain parts of them that fall under the AI Act. So for all these models, providers will need to offer some transparency along with the value chain. And for the most powerful models, there will also be some risk management obligations. But important to remember that AI developers will never be left alone. We are supporting them. We are supporting them with a code of practice. We are supporting them with new guidelines to help developers avoid legal anxiety. And soon, service desks and many, many other services that are being now in preparations while we are starting to employ the EU's AI Act. Now, let me tackle one of the big myths which is being often said in various discussions. And that is, if you regulate AI, you kill innovation. But let me ask, would you get on a self-driving bus with no brakes just because others are doing so? Europe believes in safe innovation. The AI Act was designed not to stifle creativity, but to give innovators the clarity and confidence they need. And here is how we are putting that into practice. Regulatory sandboxes, that was already mentioned by a few speakers, in every member state, by the way. This is something which will be developed. So these are legal test kitchens for startups where all ideas, even the craziest, can be run without putting general public at risk. Then is the digital innovation hubs and testing facilities, providing free advice, fewer headaches, and so on. And then there will be targeted support for SMEs so they can spend more time building and less time decoding legal texts. And regulation certainly isn't enough, because to lead in AI, we also need investment, we need infrastructure, and we need ambition. That's why we are backing the AI Continent Action Plan, which was launched this April with real resources and big goals. The Commission will strengthen Europe's AI and supercomputing infrastructure with a network of AI factories. That was mentioned by the Minister of Economy too. 13 of these factories are already being deployed around Europe's world-leading supercomputers. They will support EU AI startups, industry, and researchers in developing AI models and applications. Private investments in gigafactories, even a bigger version of the AI factories, will be further stimulated through the Invest AI, a new platform that is being established, which will mobilize at least 20 billion euros investments for up to 5 AI gigafactories across the Union. And of course, here is where Lithuania is also jumping on the journey. The minister mentioned that alongside Poland, Estonia, and Latvia, it has proposed a Baltic AI gigafactory, a very important initiative, really doing a great job there, and has also just recently applied to build a smaller scale version of this, an AI factory with a consortium of various public and private bodies. So I think, you know, because if AI is going to shape the future, it also has to be Lithuanian, European, but also Lithuanian. So I'm coming to an end of my little speech here, but let me just say a few little preemptive questions and to give you some answers, because being the ambassadors of Lithuania or ambassadors of other European countries, you might be participating in various debates on this. So I think those might be helpful to you. Number one, isn't the European Union overdoing it? Well, my answer, we don't think so. We see regulations like a seatbelt. You don't ban cars, you just make them safe. So we see regulation as an enabler, not as a blocker. And this I also was seeing in one of the presentations here. Number two, will the AI, Artificial Intelligence Act will be simplified in the current strive for simplification on various EU rulebooks? My answer here is too early to say. Well, we are still in the rollout mode. Let's not rewrite the rule book before the ink is even dry on it. Now we focus our efforts on supporting stakeholders in the process of implementation. But the answer is it's not excluded, no? So number three, will parts of the act perhaps be delayed? That was also raised even here. Well, here I would say that the AI Act applies in stages. Its first rules already apply since 2 February this year, rules on prohibited AI practices and so on. Rules on general purpose AI and governance will start applying from August this year, very, very soon. And in the future, for rules that do not apply yet, we do not rule out the possibility that there could be some delays for the thing, but only for the things where the standards are not ready, because we need to have the standards ready. Of course, any possible measures will have to be carefully weighed against negative impact, because you have legal certainty, you have expectations of the companies and so on. So, Excellencies, ambassadors, you are Lithuania's eyes and voices in the world. When you speak about the EU's approach to AI, you are not defending bureaucracy. You are standing for the European model. You are standing for the European model where technology remains a tool for people, grounded in rights, grounded in transparency, and grounded in democratic values. We are not here to fear innovation, but we are here to shape it, not to slow down progress, but to steer it wisely. And yes, perhaps in the process, we'll manage to replace some bureaucratic forms, a few meetings, and on a good days, we will also be able to replace a few overly long speeches, most likely. So on this note, thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Marius, very much indeed for really good presentation, providing us the description of EU AI regulation and also EU AI ambitions. And you finished with good questions and answers and also suggestions to discuss. So I really would like now to move to the next part of our conference, and that is the panel discussion. And I would like to start with introducing the moderator of the panel, Dr. Tomas Krilavičius, the president of Infobalt, and also a leading voice in Lithuania's innovation and AI ecosystem. And I would also like to ask all the distinguished speakers to join join moderator at the panel on the stage, please.
Maybe before we start the discussion, we can have 1 minute break for everybody to stand up and sit down, so everybody wakes up and relaxes a bit. So, Mindaugas, thank you for the suggestion while everybody gets here. Yes, so I think we are ready to continue, hopefully. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
And so,
thank you. Can you give me the glass?
We are at the gates of new, brave, Gen AI crazy world. And we can see it from how many people we have here today. I mean, it's sunny outside, it's warm outside, and all of you are here listening to these speeches and discussions about AI and how to deal with that. So, if you are so interested, let's continue this discussion. And we had very different views and very different viewpoints on how we are dealing with AI, what's happening with AI worldwide. And of course, everybody of us personally have to build some position about it. But again, when businesses, countries, and unions have to think how to deal with this phenomena, which is very interesting, kind of strange, scary, and also very attractive animal. So we had very different topics, but maybe we can start together and look. So if we have such a low adoption at the businesses level in Europe, while probably all children are using it every day and most of us are playing with it around. So maybe we can talk a bit about it. So please.
For me, that triggers. Oh, does this work? Does this work? Okay. For me, this triggers the question of skilling. Obviously, our kids, I have 2 kids, 13 and 18, they use ChatGPT and Gemini and other tools on a day-to-day basis. They use it for their homework, not because of the fact that they want to cheat, because they want to be more productive and then to produce better results. And this is also what we need to inject into the industry. It's not about cheating or using the inappropriate tools. It's about experimenting with possibilities. We heard that from many speakers today. I think the biggest risk in AI is not apocalyptic scenarios. It's not high-risk scenarios that go bonkers. That is not the apocalyptic scenario that AI at some point will become free and undermine societies. It's not using and leveraging the opportunities. And that is true for every individual. That is true for every company of any size, in any city, in any country on this planet. So you need skilling. And skilling doesn't happen overnight. There's a couple of companies, including Google, that have offered and are offering free skilling initiatives. We've been doing that for 15 years in Europe. Some 15 million people in Europe have used these free trainings. And they go far beyond AI. It's all about digital technology. So this is why we have been doing this for so long. And you can get certifications from chambers of commerce. So you can really improve your CV. And the scope of these trainings is very wide, from low-level introductory courses to digitization, all the way to the highest and sophisticated training course on quantum computing. So you can choose whatever you need for whatever your level is. And that is needed. Does this need a reform or revolution of the education system in most countries? Probably so. I'm a fierce and very passionate fighter for change in the education system. We need a lot more education for trainers, a lot more keeping up with the pace of technology and societal changes, because the questions that are around are so impactful and so far-reaching. I could go on.
Yeah, so just to make it more, maybe discussion more rich, so I'll mention some factors which are mentioned in literature and in discussions as well. So yes, it's skilling, but it's also price of hardware, availability of hardware, lack of talents, so in some sense it's related, electricity pricing, quality of models, pricing, all these very different aspects. So maybe we can continue with all these all around the.
Yeah. You mean on the application of
yes.
how to...
In Europe, we have only a few companies using it. Or maybe we just don't know that people are using it.
Well, maybe we don't know some of the things. Sometimes we need to ask our kids. My 17 years old is training me, so I'm in the last months I became much more aware of the possibilities. Really, I think the rate of adoption is so much faster. And by the way, an anecdotal thing is that my 17 years old, when he chats with a chatbot, he always says hi, and then he says thank you and bye. And I was asked, why are you doing this? And he said, just in case they actually take over the world, I will be in a better position already.
It also
with
shows
some karma points.
It also shows good education. So they grew up in a good household.
That's right.
Good.
Well, but I think if to speak from the youth perspective, we certainly the low adoption is not because of EU AI Act, because it just starts to apply. So I think we need to look deeper, and we need to put the enabling factors. And this is actually what is being done exactly at this moment, be it for education, to make it wider known and available. I mean, you need to invest money into this somehow, or to create some interesting ways, incentives for people to actually start using more. You need, of course, for more adoption, you need all these factories and gigafactories, which we are trying to put in as quickly as possible, because you need the hardware, you need where the companies would train. But that is, of course, not for the wider adoption. On the other hand, if you have more companies, then the AI becomes more known, and then also people use it more, so to say. So a lot of work to be done there, but I must say it's not really also dark. For example, when we've been calculating how many researchers we have, not the applications, but the researchers, and we see that it's a good number. It's more than in the US, even if you compare by per capita, or if you compare in terms of GDP. So I think we are moving there. We are moving there. It's good that the priority, the focus is put on that, and in the EU we are moving there. And Lithuania is also not losing on that. They are trying to be on the same train.
Okay, thank you, PJ. Please.
Yeah, I like to think about this subject as diffusion. So we're thinking about how does the AI diffuse into society further. I think of three things. When you look at the literature, there's the usefulness, there's the reliability, then there's the awareness. And so we're talking about the children getting, it's useful. And so they're jumping on it. But I think it's ageless. I think, there are people who are starting to use it for research at home, for research at work, for hopefully diplomats are using it to write cables, help draft. So it's useful. It's reliable, meaning when I turn to it, it doesn't hallucinate anymore. That problem is being designed towards zero. Mm-hmm. Even AI is being used to design it towards zero. There's something called BlenderBot 3, which tries to destroy the ability of a model's ability to hallucinate, and that's being driven to 0.01%. So they're becoming more reliable. That helps diffusion. And then third is like awareness. If you look at just the transfer value for how nuclear awareness began in World War II, you had a scientist, Einstein, 1939. He writes a letter to the president, and he says, "Hey, boss, we've become aware that there could be a chain reaction in uranium that would release a lot of energy. And it's also possible that a certain regime, the United States, in Europe, is thinking about this. They've taken control of uranium supplies in Czechoslovakia, and you should probably think about this." So this is called the Einstein letter to our president in 1939. This kind of awareness coming out of the scientific community, coming out of the labs is essential. I will just close this by saying one of our companies often releases its model to pro-civilization organizations like Khan Academy that I mentioned before. So they get an early release of the model and think, how will you use this model to improve education outcomes? They do that, and then that company creates the awareness. So now families all across our country are becoming aware of the goodness. So I think it's really usefulness, reliability, and awareness surges the diffusion of the AI.
Yeah, thank you. Doris, please.
Okay. I try not to repeat with what I agree here listening, but maybe to add, there is one part what we haven't mentioned is actually, I think the challenge is also relies today in the data. That do we have enough like quality data in order to use the AI in the right way and to have more this kind of models. And the other part, what I think is important is trust. How to build trust that when you're using the AI tools, that it's done in the safe way and that the companies can rely that it's okay to do it, and the customers know in the transparent way how it will be used. That you say it, these kind of components are also, I think, important to start to use it more.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think, from business perspective, and also, when we as Nactus AI talk with our, potential customers, leads, and, we talk not only about this, AI revolution companies, AI-driven companies that already probably use AI, right? I mean, many big companies, tech companies, they use AI. It's not that, only few companies use AI in Europe. There are many companies that actually use it, how we say, in the back end. But when we talk with these so-called legacy companies, or the companies that are not that much tech-driven, I think there are at least two things that matter to them. First, they have to see the benefit of AI. That's business is about the benefit, right? And about the values, but probably the benefit sometimes goes first. So the benefit, it means that they need some kind of trainings about the AI. They don't really understand, all right, I can talk with ChatGPT, but that just consumes my employees' time. How does that really help? And the other thing is trust. What you also mentioned is that, and trust, I think, is from two sides. One is on the input side, how are my inputs, how the text that or basically the information, the data that I'm providing to the model, is it actually safe? Am I providing it for training for the model? Is it what's the retention? Can I delete it anytime I want? Who's going to see it? And we've heard all the stories in the media within this so-called ChatGPT moment, a few years ago, about company's employee pasting the company's code into the models, into the model, and then the model replying to somebody else about with that code and so on. I think we're not at that part anymore. They're like business use of all the models are usually private and not training on that anymore. But the businesses not necessarily know that. And the second part of the trust, I think that's also important, is about the outputs. About what the model brings back to you. Can I actually trust that part? Because models tend to hallucinate, right? Hopefully less and less, but still, can I trust that? Do I need to recheck a few times? Can I do the recheck with another AI? Can I trust that another AI? So basically, how can we adopt that if we cannot trust that? And actually, if we adopt that, what benefits does it bring to us? So basically, I think it's mostly about I don't know, conference like that, but also about trainings in the very local level, And I think the new generation with the kids that are already using AI will grow up, and we'll see, I think, very different results in not only in 10 years or 15 years. I think we'll see very different results in in I don't know, half a year or even a year. Because also what was mentioned that there are many researchers on AI, right? So I think the bigger companies, the ones that have extensive R&D departments, are are researching how to use the AI, and they will deploy that. Probably they are already working on that. We just as a consumers or business, we just don't see that in the front end yet, but we will see that pretty soon, I think.
I think this is a very important question to start with, and I'll just state up front that at least the Indian government is particularly focused on this question of adoption, because I think they realize there is the potential for benefit, but unless you get it into the hands of people, you're not going to realize those benefits. So this is actually going to be the focus of the AI summit that India is going to be hosting in 2026 in February. So I invite you all to read about it and participate and attend if you can. But I want to address kind of the 3 points that came up. One is this question of AI adoption, but for what, right? And I think we need to answer that question to really get people excited about using it. So, at the government level, I think it's really important to paint a vision of, you are bringing AI into the hands of citizens or, small businesses or even, the government agencies itself. But for what? And I think at least the Indian government has tried to articulate this by saying, if you're going to apply it for AI in the agricultural sector, I want to see increase in crop yields, right? If you're going to apply it to education, I want to see tangible impacts in improvements in learning outcomes. If you're applying it in healthcare, show me there are improvement on certain health metrics, right? And that's what's going to galvanize people to try and adopt AI more across all of these different sectors, right? So I think that's what AI adoption, but for what? Two is this question of cost, and I think again, different I think parts of the world have different approaches to AI development and adoption and deployment. I think the approach that India, but a large part of the global South is taking is, can we be cost efficient and cost effective, right? And that starts at the development stage, which is to say, look, we don't want to build these large, frontier advanced models, for bragging rights. We're concerned about, the use cases for, as I said, tangible impact. So let's focus on smarter models, right? Let's use free and open source models, right? Like Llama from Meta, or even DeepSeek from China, right? You'll be surprised. Might be surprised to hear that India is actually a lot of the innovation that's happening is built on free open source models built by China. Is this a potential national security risk? Yes, of course, we should have that conversation. But that's what's increasing adoption: low cost upfront, right? OpenAI, for example, is thinking about how can they reduce cost for what they call inferencing, because what the population in India wants is not to use AI, compute for large development purposes, but small, prompts at population scale. You need large amounts of. How can we reduce inference costs to serve the Indian market, right? So, lots of cost, I think, factors to keep in mind. And finally, the point that I was talking about in my presentation as well is this question of capacity. Is unless people, have the knowledge, it's a question of awareness and skilling. Is unless people are aware of both the capabilities and the risks, adoption is not going to kind of translate. And especially on the capabilities bit, I think the kinds of presentation that you made, Jens, today, are really showcasing the power and the capability in a very real, intuitive sense, right? And this is as much about, conferences like this, dialogues like this, but even at a UI, UX level, right? The product needs to be able to prompt people, like you'll have a little toolkit that says, why don't you ask this question? You don't have to think about what that question is. So they'll just prompt a potential question, and that'll take you down, a rabbit hole. So I think these are the types of things that can help increase adoption.
Okay, thank you. So I didn't hear anybody complaining about regulations yet, but so it means that adoption rate, at least mostly it was about education and awareness, and education in sense like what we have here as well, not just studies or schools or whatever. So it's nice that we are having this event, so it means that we are increasing adoption rate, yes. But let's move to next steps. So we didn't hear anything that we have problem with regulation in adoption up to now. But how does it feel? And what do you think how we should play this game? So of course we have this risk-based regulation of EU. And Tamlan gave very nice presentation on how to look at it. But maybe you can start on some summarization, and then everybody else can give their position actually. Are we going too far in Europe, or maybe it's not enough, or maybe we have to have more granularity, whatever?
Sure. I mean, I'll keep this brief because I'm very interested to hear the other perspectives. But I think, if you talk to a startup founder about, how they're thinking about AI adoption, you'll be surprised to hear that a lot of startups and founders want regulation. They want some regulation because it gives them clarity. Makes investment decisions more predictable. But what they don't want is compliance-heavy regulation, right? They don't want to be, and India is famous for this, right? For for one document application, you have to submit 3 copies. You have to sign them physically. That's the kind of regulation they don't like. And so, if you just go through any piece of legislation, including the AI Act, you really have to bucket them into different pieces. This is the kind of regulation that's useful for innovators, right? It gives them clarity, like where in this risk classification. I know maybe the AI Act by itself doesn't provide that, but it's the guidelines that you provide later on that gives them that clarity, right? And that's the kind of enabling, innovation-friendly regulation I would want and I support, and I know that the startups and founders I speak to, at least back home, also want. But then you have to kind of think about other types of regulation, which is very compliance-heavy. It's about documentation, and that's the kind of regulation that we need to either revisit or remove. And I think that's the journey that we're on right now.
Me too. Yeah. So, look, I fully agree on the topic that we do need the regulation, right? From the business, from the startup perspective, we do need regulation, but we do need it as a compliance, not a compliance heavy one. So that I fully agree on. For instance, Nord Security, this cybersecurity company that's in our portfolio, we have more than 30 people working on compliance only, and that's besides the legal department. So on in legal, we have at least I think 8. I mean, legal department is like 30 people as well. We have at least 8 people working on privacy, which is mostly GDPR. So we can allow ourselves that. But the let's say probably most innovative or very young companies, that can think of the things that the bigger ones are not, even considering that. So the newborns of innovations cannot allow themselves, to have tens of people in compliance department. And we definitely do regulation because that levels the playing field for at least in the EU. EU-wide regulation means that we have, as somebody mentioned, that not 27 regulations, but rather 1 regulation per EU. But it has to be less than 500 pages as it is right now. If we take this tree that you showed with a few 3 or 4 regulations regulating AI, I think that's more than 500 pages, and that's without all the guidelines and so on. So that's a bit heavy, and it's a bit vague. I recently read the White & Case, which is a huge law firm, global law firm, White & Case handbook for EU AI Act. I think it starts. I can even quote you, but I think it starts. EU Act is very vague and hard to understand, but so even for the global law firm, it's rather hard to understand. And they mention different parts where it's kind of there are many open questions there. So again, for the company that can hire White & Case, it's probably easier, but for the for the younger companies, it will be tougher to adopt. But why haven't we mentioned regulation when we said that it's stopping adoption? EU Act is not kind of live yet, right? Just a small parts of it, so it doesn't stop the companies yet. The other ones, I don't know, the GDPR, we kind of got used to that. It's heavy. We understand the values, but it's clear now. But there are also other laws. I don't know, labor laws, tax laws, all the other things that also, kind of maybe not stopping AI adoption as such, but might stop, some businessmen creating the company in total. So there is, regulations. We kind of got used to that. I don't think you ever not create the company because of regulation. I hope EU Act does not change that.
Yeah. I could say that I rest my case, that everything is said here already. But yeah, you mentioned that no company will not be established because of the law, but the companies can move away because of the law.
Yeah,
when we look at the unicorns, then 30% of the European unicorns doesn't have today anymore their headquarters in Europe. The big part of that is the regulation. Why they are not here anymore. So I think that's the one thing what we should think. Then definitely everything concerned with the duplication is the problem in the regarding the AI Act. That are we speaking only that how to adopt the AI rules into the sectorial acts, that not to have like AI Act and sectorial act, that adopt as much as possible. I think then it makes things more clearer for the company side. I think this is like one thing, and of course whenever if we build this kind of massive regulation, then we also should think about how to build these tools which are helping companies to comply there. Are this kind of, I don't know, self-evaluation forms or something that to see am I the object of the AI regulation, AI Act, for example, and all these kind of things, that how we help these SMEs to calm them down, that yes, you still can innovate here in Europe. It's okay. It's a good place where to do the innovation and do your business. And then we have to also think about these kind of tools when you do this kind of rules. And as I said overall already in my speech, that overall aim of the AI Act, I think it's okay. It's good that to have trust and safe solutions in Europe. Sure. That's of course, that's also the companies what they want. But then the part is that is it too heavy? When we can count it on the pages, but we can count it also how clear it is, how clearly it's formed there, that which kind of sectors or areas are under the AI Act and which are not, and so the clarity there, and all these kind of things, I think.
If I can jump the line, I was intrigued by one thing that you said, that companies actually are moving away. We've just performed a couple of studies across Europe on another regulatory environment called the Digital Fairness Act, something that may happen or may not happen in the future. And it's aimed at very good intentions, at protecting consumers from malicious schemes, malicious advertising, malicious cybersecurity threats, and so forth. So very good intentions. But it's also looking at personalization, which is widely spread across many digital services, including advertising. So adverts on the internet become valuable and relevant to both the user and the company, and companies like Google in the advertising ecosystem, because they connect demand and supply. So one of the ideas in this Digital Fairness Act is to substantially restrict or even ban personalized advertising. Now you could say, okay, a company like Google has a massive interest in protecting digital ads, which is true, but it's fueling a much bigger economic ecosystem. You know, companies like NordVPN, you are reliant on personalized advertising. So every dollar that is spent at companies like Google is about tenfolded in the entire ecosystem. So we performed a study to understand how small and medium-sized enterprises see the value of personalized advertising. And they said, 80% said, this is the core fuel for our economic growth. We cannot live without this. And 30% even said, and I found that a dramatic number, 30% said, if this is banned through some new form of overcomplicated regulation, in addition to compliance needs, we will have to close some of the business units in Europe, or even move out of Europe entirely. And I think this is the big danger. Again, I don't want to defend my own business model. Yes, I wanted that, but it's more about the entire ecosystem that is suffering with this. Everybody in Europe talks about competitiveness, simplification. If we complicate our lives further, specifically for small companies, the Googles, yes, for us it's cumbersome, compliance, and we have these hundreds, if not thousands, of internal and external legal consultants that tell us what to do in order to be compliant, but we can shove it off. For a small startup, this can be a decision of make or break, and this is the dangerous thing. If you want competitiveness in Europe, you can't shoot yourself in the foot by adding additional regulation.
Especially the SMEs,
yes,
the small, medium-sized companies.
Yes.
Thomas, I think that this is why it didn't come up originally when you asked us, because you're talking about degrees of diffusion. So AI is diffusing in Europe, but the question is to what degree? So I think that I'll start just there by saying, I think there's one simple question to ask and one simple sort of answer that comes from it. One is, what is it doing to your companies if, in fact, the innovation is there? So the basic argument is, if you believe that the majority of the AI innovation is coming out of companies, you have to ask, what is the law doing to your companies? and then how much of the law was developed with the companies in mind, I think is a question. And if it made the operating environment of the companies drastically more expensive, or it reduced their accessible market, I'm not sure how many of them know that 85% of the AI applications don't apply to the AIUU Act. That's a fascinating figure you authored in your speech. I think in the United States, we've never heard that number at all because perhaps it's not in the jungle yet. It's not released. But once you ask that question, you say, what is the law doing to our companies if we want a positive AI future, as you've said? Then I think the result of that comes down to an application-centered form of regulation. You're thinking about for what? What are you talking about? And such the high-risk consequence use phrase, which we developed for our country at SCSP where I work. We developed our own high-risk use case model to say, this is obviously dangerous, AI-controlled systems for nuclear weapons, yada. So you obviously have to do that. But then in between that, you think, what is the application that has to be regulated? And I'll just tell a simple story. The difference between regulating nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, had we taken a very general approach to that in World War II, it's very difficult to imagine that 10% of the world's energy would be developed by fission right now. Right now, over 476 fission reactors in the world are generating 10% of the world's energy. Regulating that is not the same as regulating weapons, so the application is everything. I would further suggest that once the applications became known, then the wisdom of how to manage it became clear. So for example, the International Atomic Agency and the control of nuclear materials and nuclear weapons became very clear, almost self-evident, once the weapons were created. But in some sense, we're creating a lot of regulation before you even know the full extent of the application area, which in my short speech I tried to indicate is completely societal across every aspect of your society because you're regulating a general purpose technology. So in summary, I'm trying to say, I think if the innovation is in your private ecosystem, the regulation would say, what are we doing to our companies? And then from that, you would most likely land on an application-centered form of regulation so that you don't regulate out innovation before it's even appeared.
So,
I think, okay, the jury is still out there, how the AI Act will be, implemented and so on. But if history tells us something, it tells that more often than not, the EU rules were becoming a global standard. There is this famous law professor, Anne Bradford, in 2012, she coined the term Brussels effect. And the Brussels effect, she analyzed various forms of regulation, starting from mergers, competition law, product safety, use of chemicals, even the GDPR, although there I'm not 100% happy myself that I need to press all those, allow or reject. Maybe we will simplify that. We come to this.
Law evolves.
But even this one and many other various examples where, in fact, at the beginning, there was a lot of resistance. People were thinking whether it's really good or not, and so on. But somehow, maybe because of the size of EU market, maybe because the regulation itself, was made quite fine once you adopt to it. Maybe it's the economies of scales for the companies because then they do not need to separate somehow the businesses. It's very often that the EU regulation has been taken as a standard and then applied further. I don't know if it's going to be like this with the digital ones. I don't know. It's difficult to say. It's it's just being implemented. So as I say, the jury is there. Are the companies moving away because of this regulation? Well, here again, I haven't seen the figures really and for which reasons they are moving. But if the report of Draghi, which has been released last year, and that's we in Europe sometimes maybe even too often start showing the problematic things to the world. But this is how the public diplomacy works here, because it's the 27 member states, and then you need to somehow convince others, and then you use the public means to that. So there is a lot of criticism about how we do things in Europe. But what I read there, one of the main criticisms actually for companies being in the US while they are growing up and scaling up is problems of access to capital in Europe, which is a completely different problem. And in fact, the problem of access to capital is because we have too little harmonization in the EU, because we have all these 27 different states and different regulations of capital markets. That's why the capital markets are not deep enough, and that's why the companies can only rely on bank funding or some simplified ways of funding. And in the US, you all of a sudden have all these different forms. So I don't know. Let's see. The jury is out there, but I think EU AI Act is one thing. Another thing which is being done now with all these regulatory sandboxes, with all these testing facilities, with all that other support. And I think with the political focus nowadays on simplification and in making it business friendly, I really hope it's going to be a good piece of legislation and it's going to work fine.
I think don't get the round wrong. I think everybody agrees that AI is too important of a technology to not regulate. So you need to have, you call them boundaries. You need these boundaries, and you need clear strategies on what to do with the highest risk of applications. But like the EU Act, the AI Act defined, you want to have a risk-based systems, not regulating a technology, but regulating individual applications. So the same chatbot that you and I use to chat over some fun activity and have fun with our kids should not be used in the same context without further look in a highly regulated medical environment or legal environment. So you can't regulate the chatbot technology. You should regulate the individual use of that technology. Exactly.
Okay, so we had nice warm-up talking about regulation and adoption, but I have, I think, even more complicated questions. So digital sovereignty. So, I mean, now geopolitical situation worldwide is not so nice anymore. So we had kind of nice period when everything seemed very cool. And now we have a lot of strange things happening. And in Europe, we have a lot of discussions about sovereignty of EU, but also sovereignty of different countries. Now, among biggest large language models, we have only Mistral. But for example, countries like Germany, Poland, we are building and already have quite decent models. We are looking at that in Lithuania as well. And we are investing in that. So what is your take on that? How should we play this game and not to go too deep, to have separate operating systems and model for each village, but also to feel safe, in this world? So maybe we can start from
how much time do I have? So
we are limited,
Okay. So I think it has never been easier for any company of any size to harness the opportunities that digitization brings. It has never been easier. And sovereignty does not mean that everything needs to be invented in your own country or in your own village or in your own European Union. It means that you have degrees of freedom to choose from whatever technology you develop yourself, from whatever technology you may want to license from whatever partner in whatever country, and the freedom to change whatever you do. So as a company owner, I should be able and free to say, and this is what happens today, I license a technology from a company like Google. I develop a couple of things myself. I do not stop in investing in research in my own company. And maybe I also buy technology from a third party. So next year, the situation may look different. Maybe Google is too expensive. Maybe they don't offer the service that I need. So I have found a way to develop that myself because it's so easy to develop. So Google, thank you, goodbye, or Google is replaced by another vendor. The ability, the degrees of freedom to do that within literally a couple of days or a couple of hours, that is sovereignty, and not that you need a data center in your country, not that you need a language model that is developed in your country or in your village, but you need to have these degrees. But again, it's important to not stopping to invest in research and developing in country and in Europe services and products. And fortunately, and for some reason, Europe is bad at marketing. Israeli companies or US companies, they stand on both feet and say, we are the greatest developer and provider of service XYZ. For some reason, Europe is too shy in boasting and marketing their great services. We have a representative of a unicorn sitting here from Lithuania. I learned about a second unicorn today in Lithuania, Vinted. So we have these success stories and we should talk about them much more.
Yeah, thank you for research part as well. So Marius can continue.
Well, sovereignty is now one of the biggest topics, but I think we've just woken up to that topic quite recently, in fact, and it's good that we've woken up, but a lot of homework now needs to be done. We've started that homework at the EU level with, by the way, with the Green Deal, which is not very much liked nowadays, but this is where, by the way, the EU's technology, EU has a technological advantage. And the same Draghi report, which I mentioned, which compares, and you had the slide with that was US and China, no EU in that, but I know that on some of the places, in particular of the green technologies, EU is doing really well, and with advanced technologies being produced here and so on. But of course, sovereignty is not only about technology, it's about so many things. Once you start looking, you realize that all these critical materials is also about sovereignty, because if somebody controls it, that might be a problem for you. We know that the cars which are electric, we didn't know that, but now we know that the cars which are electric might be switched off from far away, and this is sovereignty question. The same goes for various electrical inverters, even, which are producing the energy, the solar energy, and those are also about sovereignty. So many questions, and I think, with the Critical Materials Act, with the economic security strategy, which has been done by the EU already a couple of years ago, we really started embracing the concept and doing good things. And certainly we need to look also, be vigilant with these type of technologies, because we're also becoming more dependent on them. The more you use them, the more useful you see they are, but then you realize how dependent you are, because you are maybe 10 times quicker with some of them. So what happens when you do not have access to it for whichever reason one day? So you have to also take that into account as well. And what is a good thing is that Lithuania is so vigilant on this. In the EU, 27 member states. So we always learn from each other. And Lithuania being at the forefront of all these economic things, it often gives a completely new perspective, of security perspective, and that is on many things, on disinformation, on many things, it's being taken into perspective.
I'd like to just briefly, just so everybody has time to answer this one, to take a state view and a little bit of the history I tried to bring up in my speech. When Lithuania was coerced by China, starting with the Chinese MFA clash with protesters on the 30-year anniversary of the Baltic Way, here, just behind us. When that happened, Lithuania went on a place to represent its own honor as a state, to not be coerced. The coercion increased. Europe responded, in a reminder of the intellectual history, with the EU Coercion Act, the EU Anti-Coercion Act. It took 2 years to form this law, but it was based in large part by how China, as an authoritarian nation, was coercing and infringing upon the sovereignty. So I want to take digital sovereignty up to that level. It's a grand strategy. And think about the leverage that China had over Lithuania and Lithuania's ambition to regain its sovereignty over kind of all tech spheres of influence. That is how I think about the question of digital sovereignty. The reason the EU is not on there is because the United States, no matter what you think, and no matter how you read the IRA Act, and no matter how you think about immigration in the United States, continuously, forever, independent of any leader, sees Europe as friends. That is unchanging. It is in the mores, the folkways, and the taboos of the nation. Therefore, we don't compare the leverage of Europe over the United States, not because it has none, but because they're not authoritarians. And when single-party unchecked systems tend to come into the world, history indicates that they consume land and people. We don't think that way of Europe now. So we don't compare the leverage they have because they're friends. So that's how I think of digital sovereignty. Lithuania's own quest for its own technological independence is a story of that sovereignty.
Doris, please.
Okay. I think it's important not to mix up the sovereignty with the protectionism. Then,
this is why I interpret it that way from my own worldview.
And that's why also I think in EU we tending like little bit to mix up those two together. So we have to think in this way that I'm pro free market.
But isn't protectionism to guard sovereignty?
It can be, but
it can be. That's
yeah,
all I.
but together
that's all
with
I
the
ask.
but
that's
together with the like-minded partners, let's say,
sure,
that not
of course.
close yourself.
Then it's more positive and powerful.
Yeah,
agreed.
So we agree there. Yeah. So in this sense, I think yes, Europe has to increase our ability. What concerns regarding the semiconductors, for example, and everything what we need in order to do this AI developments and be advanced in. We lack in Europe, for example, cloud hyperscalers and so on. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't collaborate with like-minded countries and partners. And in order to be resilient, and we can't without partners. And I think that's the important part in the sovereignty, that it doesn't mean that everything has to be done alone and by ourselves, but yes, we have to increase our own ability also in the same time.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here, but to what was said, but I'll say a few bits. So one thing is that, if we allow innovation to foster, we'll have digital, sovereignty, but from the sense that there will be made, digital, AI-driven businesses in Europe just because they can do that. They will do that. Do we need to, to create another LLM here, for instance, in Lithuania, buy all the GPUs and just to try to have something Lithuanian and kind of create sovereignty in that way? I don't think so. You have a lot of cash to do that, and you would still hardly probably compete with Google or OpenAI or the others. Should we trust only like the US companies and not create something in Europe? Well, we probably should have something in Europe as well. Needless to say, US is our, like you said, like-minded countries that we trust. Although we see in the change of kind of politics in the US, we sometimes feel a bit vulnerable. But I guess a long-time partnership with the US, we should trust it at least on the bigger sense. But yeah, I mean, we should probably simply foster innovation here, and innovation will happen. I don't think that the government should do something more, create something here, buy all the GPUs and create huge AI factories. AI factories are fine, but not for the sense that to create the sovereign LLM models or something here. But yeah, simply I think my take is that innovation and the businesses and the capitalism will create the sovereignty itself.
Sure. Yeah, maybe just briefly, look, the definition of sovereignty, I think, again, is something that every country decides for itself. There's resilience, self-sufficiency, economic freedom, choice. I think at least the approach that the Indian government has said is in the specific context of AI, sovereignty is important. But we don't want to fall behind in the AI kind of race, right? Which is to say that if you want to have self-sufficiency across the AI stack, you're not going to be able to achieve that, perhaps ever, but certainly not on a short timeline, which is why I think the approach that many country governments around the world seem to be taking is let's be pragmatic about it, right? And really there are two paths then to sovereignty, which is to say, one, let us think about where we can be self-sufficient. And there are countries around the world which say, we want to domestically manufacture critical parts of the AI stack, right? Advanced GPUs, for example. But not every country can do that, right? So one path is build self-sufficiency in some levels of the AI stack. But two is, where do you have competitive advantage, right? And then, for a country like India, it's not at all about building advanced GPUs. It's about, leveraging your data, leveraging your, talent, right? And building sovereignty in that way, right? Innovating at the application layer, right? Not at the frontier model development, right? And then and I really appreciate the point, which is then to really think about how can you partner with like-minded countries to fill the gap that you're missing out on, right? And India, for example, has very strategic partnerships with the US, with EU, and so on, to be able to, fill in those gaps. And I think, when looked at holistically, I think that's a very practical way of approaching sovereignty.
Okay, so it seems that we are out of time. So I would like to thank participants of a discussion. I would like to continue, but Lina told me that that's all. So, just to summarize, we have to learn, we have to help each other, and we have to stay open-minded. Yes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Thomas, and all the panelists for a dynamic, very, very interesting discussion. Oh, sorry, this is the stage. I would like to invite to be patient for 10 more minutes. Because we are moving to the last but one part of our conference, and that is concluding remarks. And I would like to invite now actually the initiator of this conference, Mr. Laimonas Tallat-Kelpša, who first decided that we have to have such a conference today with ambassadors and such a distinguished audience and speakers for the concluding remarks. Please, Laimonas.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for your patience, for your participation, and especially we thank our panelists for their very valuable contributions. I was asked by Deputy Minister before he had to leave, so how I'm going to proceed with the wrap-up. Will I ask AI to do it, to write it for me? And I thought maybe I will rely on human intelligence for this time. But on the other hand, I had another technological choice, because that's the way I was proceeding with my notes, and that's the technology I will use to read them through. It's probably also a symbolic testimony in this transition period where we, all of us, appear, especially the ladies and gentlemen of middle age like myself, where we have to battle with the approaching technologies all the time and then decide how to move onward. But it was indeed a very inspiring discussion, so I'll just try to share the key takeaways, which I have put on my list. If I miss something, please remind me, but maybe later around the glass of coffee, right? So one thing that was repeated by many participants here, that AI is an amazing technology. We all agree on that. AI today can help to control CO2 emissions. AI helps us control traffic. It can even help to control floods, and it can help you find your glasses if you missed them somewhere in your office. That was very visibly presented. So AI has become a general purpose technology, like an electricity. It's going to be used by everyone. And as it was noted, it's going to stay with us forever. So in this context, there are some practical questions to address. One thing is AI is no longer just a tool. AI has become an asset. AI has become a geopolitical force. Competition today is no more about territory or trade routes alone. Competition is also about data, access to data, and the instruments to process it. So whoever gains that control, it can have impact on your security on your competitiveness and on your sovereignty. And that's probably here in this particular area where governments and ministries of foreign affairs step in. AI development is driven today, it was noted, by two largest global economies, the US and China. And for small nations, small economies like Lithuania, there's no way of developing their own instruments and their own technologies that could outcompete those leading global champions. What to do? What to do for small nations like Lithuania, and most of the nations globally are smaller than China or the US. So one thing to do is for small companies and small nations to think big. And we have one practical example among us: to think big, to think global. And secondly, it was suggested we have to try to integrate the so-called good AI into very practical fields of our daily life, be it education, be it science, intelligence, health, or even diplomacy. During this last round of discussion, the question of sovereignty was raised. I took a practical advice that sovereignty doesn't mean to develop every technology of your own. It's opportunity to choose any technology and to choose it anywhere. That's what defines sovereignty nowadays. Regulation was another very important point, discussed from many different angles and by all the participants. So 3 different models for regulation were singled out. One was voluntary and non-enforceable, like applied by the US, UK, Singapore. Then we have a co-regulatory approach, and then we have a compulsory approach towards regulation. But the consensus was there across the board that AI does need a regulatory framework. And this regulation must be both innovation-friendly and human-centric. The European Union is far ahead in this regard, or Europe in general, with the Vilnius Convention, which targets and establishes a human-centric approach towards AI technology. But we also heard that the Global South is rather skeptical about adopting the regulation, and that was a new thing, at least for me. What are the challenges for global regulation here? One is about substance, so what to regulate. Interesting comparison was provided between nuclear weapon and nuclear energy, how we have approached this particular area. And then another interesting thought was that we don't need to regulate a chatbot. What we need to regulate is individual application of artificial intelligence. And second thing about the regulation is the process. Which institution will have actually to govern and supervise the regulation? And lastly, but also very importantly, who is going to enforce the rules that we are going to adopt? There are certain challenges for European regulation, as was already mentioned. One is that Europe today is lagging behind in 7 out of 8 critical technologies. AI is diffusing across the European Union industries, but only 13.5% of EU companies employ AI for their businesses today. As comparison, 33% of US companies do that nowadays. Fragmentation is a very big issue, and fragmentation which runs across sectors and also national legislations. As one speaker noted, market is there, but single market is not there as yet. And also opportunity cost, which might, like conformity with AI regulation, might cost up to 300,000 euros per company. I have checked how long is EU AI Act, so ChatGPT tells me it's 300 pages long. Just for you to understand the scope of one single piece of legislation nowadays. So what to do next? What are the ways forward to resolve those conundrums? One is change the philosophy, move from the point what the risks are to the point what opportunities could be. Second, to create incentives for responsible AI instruments. Third, to ensure and legally ensure transparency of how AI is being employed by businesses and through the processes that where we participate. Fourthly, we have to focus on individual rights, like right to withdraw from artificial intelligence applications. That was also an interesting observation. 5, code is law. That was a principle underlined by one of the speakers, and that practically means as we are designing the code for AI nowadays, probably we can already integrate the humanocentric aspects of our approach towards technology into that code, so that in the future we already have a very solid basis to move onwards and harmonize standards and legislations. That was also a practical thing. So one last just experiment I did, inspired by one of the speakers. I also cross-matched how European AI regulation or debate correlates with another important debate European Union is having today, which is the European quantum race, because quantum computers is another technology which is gaining a lot of speed, which is going to change our lives a lot, and which is also on the verge of introducing new regulations. So what key moments do we have in the quantum technology sector and which were not mentioned during the discussion today? One thing is the cutting edge. European Union has the cutting edge in research, but European Union is failing to turn research into real market opportunities. And that's probably the feature shared both by quantum and artificial intelligence sectors of European Union. Why we are having this issue? So one aspect was mentioned, was access to capital. The calculation is that a company needs an access to about 100 million investment easily if you want to make this leapfrog jump from the situation where you are, both as a startup and as a mature company, into some new kind of technology. And no bank, or very few banks in the European Union, not only will be willing, but also capable of providing you with this kind of loan. So integrating financial markets is a big issue. The policy of picking winners is not there in the European Union, because the European Union approaches the process of competitiveness from equal grounds, equal roots position. The European Union proclaims itself as a new technology neutral force, which means any technology which wins is gaining grounds. The United States has a different kind of approach. We have enlisted 18 companies at the moment, and they say these are going to be our champions, and that's where we throw our government money to help them grow and see what happens in the future. And finally, government purchases could also be an instrument to incentivize the development and growth of both artificial intelligence and quantum sectors. But all in all, it has been a very productive afternoon. I really thank you all once again, and especially invite to give you a big round of applause to our participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laimonas, and thank you all indeed for this wonderful conference. I think you were a wonderful audience, and I would like to also to ask you to give a warm round of applause to yourself. Thank you. And with the formal part concluding, we invite you to go to network a little bit, to stay longer, to share ideas, to continue discussions, and maybe to ask questions which were not asked during the conference, just in the lobby of of this call. Thank you.